All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being on time and uh, logged in even like 5 or 10 minutes early here this morning. So I appreciate everybody um, being prompt and making sure we're all up to speed on the Mayfly kit hardware and all the stuff that we're going to be using today. I assume, because we kind of told you yesterday, right before the end of the online portion of this, I told you what we were going to be using. If you see on the screen, we're going to be using the Mayfly logger board and the USB cable that you used yesterday. But we're also going to need some of the components that were in your starter kit inside the little, most of the stuff that was in the little white box, but you'll also need the battery and the larger battery that was in the smaller brown box inside the white box. And then you'll also need that antenna, which was the thing that Bob was showing us. It's the small black flexible thing. It's inside the larger plastic Pelican case. So if you open up your Pelican case, if you haven't already, that's where your antenna is. So we'll need that part for lesson 3, which is what we'll do right before 12 o'clock. So I know yesterday may have been a little anticlimactic to go to a hands-on data logger building workshop, and then at the end of the first day you still don't have a data logger that you can really use or turn on or anything. Usually in our 2-day in-person workshops, we're able to cover the material faster because we have 6 or 8 hours altogether. And so by the end of the first day, we have actually built and programmed the logger and put it in a box, and then go to a stream or the indoor stream test area that we have at Stroud, or even just using some buckets in the back of the room or wherever it is that we happen to be. We find some water to put our sensors in, and then everyone goes home knowing that they're collecting data overnight the first night, so that when they come in the morning, we look at the data on the memory cards or the website to see what we collected overnight. So we didn't have time to do all of that yesterday because of these extra steps that are involved in this. So we just, we're kind of saving all of the programming and logger stuff for this morning. So by lunchtime, in the next hour and a half, where you're going to have your Mayfly talking to your sensor, transmitting the data to the Monitor My Watershed website that you registered for yesterday, and also recording the data on a memory card. So you're going to have a completely functioning logger part sitting on your desk. But then after lunch, we're going to take them and actually put them in the waterproof case that you've got, because having a logger on a desk with a bare circuit board and all these bare wires is only half the challenge. The other half of the challenge is getting it into a box that you can put outdoors and have it survive the elements and the weather and animals and everything else that's out there. So that's what the afternoon portion is going to talk about. So this morning is only going to be talking about the Mayfly and the handful of parts on the desk and not the outdoor stuff. So yeah, in the original agenda, we had the order slightly, we had one order. We could do it in any order we want, but I was trying to make things flow a little bit easier. So I switched 1 and 2 in your agenda that if you printed out or looked at, I think the one that we sent you originally, we're going to program the Mayfly clock first and then work with the sensor in part 2, because part 3 is using that sensor to transmit the data. So it works a little better if we switch those 2 around. So lesson 1, install the watch battery in the Mayfly and program the Mayfly clock. For this part, you just need the first 2 parts that are on the upper left-hand thing here, where it says Mayfly data logger, the USB cable, and the CR1220 battery. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And all right, so if those of you who got a kit in the mail and you have your Mayfly board and all, if you have looked around in the inside of the Mayfly, you'll see, or the little white kind of, it's the smaller plastic enclosure. We'll be using that later, but if you open that up and dig through all those parts where you found the SIM card and all that, there'll be a bag that has a memory card and a memory card adapter and a couple of other things, but also what's in there is a small watch battery that's about the size of a dime that's inside a little plastic bag. you're going to need to open that up. And if you can't get the little Ziploc-y tabs to open, you can also just rip the bag. Sometimes it's kind of hard to actually get these things. It took me forever to get all of these little batteries in the bag to mail them to you. So, but it's a nice handy size for keeping that. If you just throw this bare battery in that box of parts, it's going to bang around in there and potentially short something out. And by the time the battery arrived at your house, it was going to have no power left in it. So I put it in a little bag to protect it during shipping. So our Mayfly data logger has a clock on it. I mentioned this yesterday. And if you're curious to know how in the demo that we did, when we plugged in the Mayfly and it told you what the temperature in your room was, along with blinking lights yesterday in the demo we did right at the end of the day, the clock chip that's on the Mayfly has a temperature sensor built into it. And it does that because if some of the cheaper clock chips that you would have the clock will run faster or slower depending on if the temperature is really, really hot or really, really cold. So like if you've ever had like a really cheap watch and then you come back after a couple of months or a couple of years, especially if it's been in a cold car or a hot car in the summer, and you'll notice your watch is now 2 or 3 minutes fast or 2 to 3 minutes slow. That has mostly to do with the temperature extremes that the clock chip has been subjected to. So we pay extra for this little clock chip that has a temperature sensor on it, so it reports temperature as well as what the clock is. But right now, the clock, if it's been unpowered, the Mayfly thinks as soon as you plug in the main battery, the clock is going to say January 1st, 2000, because they built the thing, a few years ago, and they figured that was a nice, easy point to start at. So if we started data logging right now, it would think that we're back in January of 2000. So we've got to set the clock to the correct time. But then every time you would remove the battery and your Mayfly is just sitting there with no power attached to it, it would forget that. And then the next time you reattach the main battery power, it would go back to January 1st, 2000. So the watch battery just kind of keeps it alive so that even if the main battery or USB cable gets disconnected, your clock will continue running, and it will keep it going for 4 to 5 years, depending on whether or not you've got the main power on. So once you put this battery in and set your clock, you shouldn't have to do this again for a very, very, very long time. The other thing that we do is we have a sketch. The logger actually, once you've got it plugged in and you've got your SIM card in and your thing is online, it will go to a time server and set the clock automatically so that you don't have to worry about the clock drifting fast or slow. But it doesn't always work for the first little bit, especially when you've got a brand new SIM card that you just activated. So sometimes it takes a few minutes before you're online. So in order to make sure that your clock is set to the right time, we're going to manually change the clock here. And so this also gives us practice at programming the Mayfly to make sure that we're all working properly, because if we can't get your laptop to talk to the Mayfly, then you can't do the next 2 sections of the lesson here this morning. So this is a good practice to make sure your computer is talking to your Mayfly. So if you remember, I had a picture yesterday of the battery, of how it goes into the battery socket on the Mayfly. It's the silver little round thing on the opposite side of the Mayfly from the memory card socket. So you want to put it with the plus side facing up. And the words, I think it says Panasonic. Sometimes they say Energizer, depending on which brand you get. But you want the words of the battery, and the battery will always have a plus printed on the battery. And you want that facing up and away from the green circuit board. So I believe if I show, I've got a this photo here. All right, this was the picture I showed yesterday. If it's going to work, come on here. That one there. So the battery goes with the plus side facing up, and you should just be able to gently push it into the little battery holder. If for some reason it's a little tight, just kind of use your finger to kind of press it in. You don't want to overforce it. But I've tested most of these when I go through the QC check of all the boards before we send them out, and they should all be working fine. There is a chance sometimes that little battery holder will pop loose from the solder connection on the back, and if that happens, just let me know and we can tell you how to fix that. But I believe everybody can figure that out. So if you plug that in upside down with the plus side facing the circuit board, you'll probably blow up the chip or short out the battery, especially if you plug in some other stuff. So we really don't want to do that. So you always want to make sure that the plus side is facing up. That's the hardest part about this portion of the first lesson here. So I'm going to keep sharing my screen, because now that we've got your battery installed in your Mayfly, we're able to program the clock and have it remember what we tell it. And I actually need a tool here. All right, so there we go. All right, so I've got my battery inserted. Now, this is the part we did yesterday at the end of the workshop, right before we ended the call, is to take your USB cable and plug it into your Mayfly logger on the USB jack, and then your Windows may make a noise or you'll get a little pop-up that says you've connected it. And then make sure your Mayfly is turned on with the on-off switch. And you can open up the Arduino program. If you left it open from yesterday, that's probably okay. Sometimes it works better if you close it and then restart it so that it kind of starts over with all the proper COM port settings and everything. All right, so what we want to do is to make sure that we're hearing from the Mayfly on the laptop. So once you've got your Arduino program open, you go back, it's up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and show you, this is what happens if you maximize your Arduino window. It's going to take up the entire screen. And that's kind of confusing for today. So you really don't need to do that. We want to keep the Arduino window kind of partial, like it can be half-sized. You don't really need to see much of the window right now. So just keep your windows small so that if you need, you can move it around. Because as we saw with a few people, if you maximize your Arduino window, then your serial monitor button is hidden below the zoom window where it's in its default location, and then you won't see that. So it works best if you keep your Arduino window kind of small for now.
Hey, Shannon.
Yep.
Tiffany wrote in the chat saying she believes she inserted the battery wrong. If she did put it in upside down, does that affect anything?
Yeah.
Or can she just put
you need to get it out and make sure that the plus is facing up before you plug it into the computer. If not, it's going to probably short something out, and you could potentially blow up the clock chip. We've had a few people plug it in wrong, and then their clock chip never responds properly after that. I've never been able to blow one up myself, but I've have had people talk about that issue. Oh, you know what?
Shannon, check the chat box. Paul is asking, and Zach is suggesting that Tiffany may have been talking about her USB.
The USB only goes one way. So if you cram it in the wrong way, then you'll probably break the little USB jack. It's a micro USB, so it's kind of a triangle shape. So it's longer on one side and shorter on the other. So it only goes in one way. And there's only one USB jack.
And then you were suggesting that once they put the battery in to turn, Paul, I think is saying turn the Mayfly on?
Yeah, so this is not, my Zoom window is not sharing the right way it's supposed to. Share screen. I want to share the whole. There we go. Okay. Yeah, you can either turn on the Mayfly now, or you can plug it into your computer and then turn it on. It doesn't make too big a difference, but the main thing is we want to have the Mayfly on, and we want to have the Mayfly connected to your USB port. Once you turn your Mayfly on, then the computer will actually recognize it as a device. If you just plug a Mayfly in when it's turned off, the computer doesn't know that anything's plugged in, so it won't do that Windows driver kind of thing. So by having it on, plugging it in, and giving it a few seconds for Windows to recognize, oh, you just plugged in that device I installed yesterday, then it should show up in your list of devices.
So to be clear, everyone should have their watch battery inserted correctly, have the USB cable inserted into the Mayfly board and inserted into their computer, and the Mayfly board turned on. And then you're suggesting that they also should now be opening Arduino. Is that correct, Shannon?
Yes. Yep. We're going to be using the Arduino program to program the board for the next hour and a half. So having the Arduino program open is very important. If like I said, if you've already got the Arduino program open from yesterday, that's fine. What you don't want to do is have Arduino open and then double click on your desktop and start up a second version of Arduino, because the two versions will kind of fight over who gets to talk to the COM port, and you're going to end up with a lot of errors. So make sure that you've only got one window open, and it'll say Sketch May 14A. Remember yesterday when we were doing this, it probably said, well, it said Sketch May 13A. So it automatically puts the day's date in there so that it kind of keeps you from overwriting anything that you do on previous occasions.
Okay, so maybe we can just have a pause here and make sure that everyone is situated.
Right. Well, no, what we want to do is, once we've done this, to make sure, this is the last step of what I was waiting for everybody to do, to hit the serial monitor button and make sure that they are getting the temperature and the blinking lights that we had yesterday. So this is the real test, is to make sure that you've got the windows open, and this is exactly what we did yesterday. So if you did it yesterday, you should be able to get back to it without too much trouble. So this is what I want to pause here and make sure everybody's got temperature going across their serial monitor screen and blinking red and green light on the Mayfly.
I have a question.
Yep.
I'm getting the temperature and everything is fine, but I have May 14th B. I don't have May 14th A. What does that mean? Any difference?
That probably means you have an additional sketch open, but that's fine. We don't need that. I was just pointing it out that it gives you a unique name every time you open this. So that's
okay.
fine. It's not a big deal.
Right.
So everyone who is working with a Mayfly board, if you can
see Paul's thumb up.
What'd you say, Shannon?
Paul's got thumbs up, so he looks like he's doing fine. Michelle's doing great. Rob's doing great. I think. I don't know. Zach looks good. Levi, you got a question?
Yeah, so I clicked on the serial monitor button, and I have an error that says board at COM3 is not available, and it's coming up under tools as COM4.
Right. So sometimes, are you using the same board you used yesterday?
Yeah.
Are you plugging it into a different USB port?
No.
Okay. Sometimes, like on my computers, I've got 3 USB jacks. So if I plug the cable into a different jack, it will give it a different COM number.
Yeah, I have 1 USB port on my computer, so I can
even then, yeah, sometimes the program is, if the computer thinks that it's a new Mayfly, either on a different port or somehow something's different, it will assign it a new COM port. So that the reason for that is so that if you happen to have 2 Mayflies, you want to have one be, 2 plugged in at the same time. They'll give them different addresses so they don't.
They're all unique.
So sometimes it will assign a new one. On one of my laptops, if I plug in a Mayfly, it'll say COM74. because I plugged 73 other mayflies into that one machine. So it gets really, really big after a while. But yeah, so for in your case, just go up to port and select COM4. And,
Okay.
and then once you open Serial Monitor, you should see that.
Sweet.
And
Is,
Tiffany has her hand up.
yeah, is the battery supposed to be facing away from the board, or like towards it?
Yeah.
With the plus sign?
The plus goes up, so you can read the plus sign.
Okay.
So if you see the picture I'm showing now on my screen share there, the
Yes.
plus goes up. If for some reason you do happen to stick these in the wrong way, or later on when it comes time, after many years it comes time to replace this battery, you have to use like a little screwdriver or a small sharp object to kind of like gently remove the battery without scratching anything on the mayfly. You don't want to dig like a big giant screwdriver in there, so you got to get something kind of small. If you use something like a toothpick or a piece of like a plastic rod or a plastic fork or something, just something that's non-metal, that's even better, because you really don't want to be sticking a lot of metal like a butter knife or something on your mayfly, because you have the potential to, if you touch two of those little metal contacts that are right next to this battery connector, then you'll blow that little chip up, and there's no way to fix that. So so if for some reason you do need to remove a battery later, just use something like a popsicle stick or toothpick or a plastic fork or something like that. All right. So it looks like everybody's good. This is, again, the part where I like to go nice and slow at the beginning to make sure everybody's on the right page and that your computer is talking properly to your mayfly, because the rest of this, when we do a bunch of, we're going to install some code, do some stuff, then we're going to keep checking that serial monitor for the data from the mayfly. So once we've got this part running, it should continue to work, and we're not going to be disconnecting the mayfly anymore from your computer. So your COM ports will stay the same. You can actually leave your serial monitor COM window open, because as we update the code each time, it will just, the stuff that's displayed there will change. But yeah, we shouldn't have to unplug or turn anything back on or off again or anything for a while. So this was the hardest part, was just getting back to this point. All right, so now we've got a battery that's backing up our clock. What we want to do now is actually tell your mayfly what time it is. So there is a sketch that we use to do that, and some people get a little confused because I didn't really back up and talk about the naming conventions for the Arduino program. But remember, I said something yesterday that Arduino was invented by a bunch of artists and like non-technical, well, they were technical, but they were trying to reach a crowd of people that might be intimidated by really complicated technical words and complicated techniques of how to do this. So they came up with the word sketch instead of program, because as an artist, you have a sketchbook and you do sketches, because that's just where you had an idea for something, you sketch it down. So the way that they like to think about the programs and the code that we actually put on a mayfly, each program that you could put on a mayfly is called a sketch, and it keeps those in a sketchbook on your computer. So the term is trying to make it a little more user-friendly to the non-engineer. So to find the examples that we already installed yesterday, I think in the one session in the morning when we were downloading all of those 1,200 and something files from GitHub, where we have all of our Arduino libraries. Those are the files that tell the mayfly how to talk to all our different sensors. Well, this little clock chip is technically a sensor, because the mayfly needs to be able to talk to it. So you already downloaded the files that you need to talk to this chip yesterday in that big download, that zip file that we got. So now we just need to find those files on your computer. So if you look at where I'm sharing on my screen now, if you go up to File and you go down to Examples, you will see a list of all of the examples that come with, there's like this tab that pops open. there's a list of all these examples like digital and basics about blinking lights and analog control sensor. The first part of this list is just the examples that come from the Arduino company that come with the software. So what you need to do is scroll down using either your scroll wheel or your touchpad, however you need to do. But you got to scroll down in your list of examples until you get to EnviroDIY DS3231. There's only 2 EnviroDIY example folders, so this is the first one of the 2. And what you see there are well, there's 5 programs, and we need to use 2 of those. The bottom one there says temperature. That's the sketch that you use to display the temperature, which is what's already running on your computer right now. So we don't really need that one. We need 2 different programs. One, we're going to start with this one that says now. So if you just click on the little sketch labeled now in EnviroDIY _ DS3231, click on now, it will open up a sketch that looks just like this. So I'm going nice and slow since this is the first time you guys are opening sketches. We've got 4 more sketches like this to open before the end of lunch. So yeah, so for everybody else, now that we're here, we've opened up the now button or the now sketch. So we want to hit the upload button in order to put the now sketch onto your Mayfly. And the Mayfly can only remember 1 sketch at a time. Right now, the Mayfly is doing the print out the temperature and blink the light sketch. When we do the now sketch, it's going to forget the original one, and you're no longer going to be printing out the temperature like you see. So, but we want to do this to make sure that we have the ability to program Mayflies. So the second button over in your toolbar at the top of the Arduino IDE is the upload button. You can leave your serial monitor open on one part of your screen, and then you can just hit the upload button. And this is also assuming that you have chosen EnviroDIY Mayfly as your board. If for some reason at the bottom of your IDE it says Arduino Uno or something else, we've got to change that. And you change that by going up to Tools and selecting Arduino EnviroDIY board. I'm pretty sure we all changed that yesterday, but just in case somebody forgot to or accidentally reverted back, just make sure that we're trying to program a Mayfly. If you try to program your Mayfly with the wrong setting in there, it's not going to work. It won't break anything, it's just not going to work. So make sure that it says EnviroDIY Mayfly down there. Assuming you've got that, hit the upload button, and I'm going to push it because it takes about 30 seconds before anything happens. So while I'm waiting for mine to upload, I'll ask if anybody's having any difficulty with that. I assume everybody's got the right board labeled in the bottom right, and they've hit the upload button. And what you're going to see is after you've uploaded, your sketch will probably upload faster than ours because I got like this, our institutional antivirus stuff does a lot of extra protection work to make sure that things that are running on your computer aren't doing something nefarious. So our sketches take a little bit longer to compile and then upload. So yours is probably already done at this point. Later on, when we do the actual sketch that sends the data to the cell network, it takes about 5 minutes for me to compile and upload, but on your computers, it'll probably only take about 30 seconds. So that's just part of the difficulty we have because we're running this industrial strength antivirus stuff, that trying to make sure that this isn't a virus that's running in the background. It's uploading and compiling and doing things. So. All right, so now mine is uploading. You'll notice there's been that green progress bar that kind of goes across the screen. So now if you look at Michelle says she's got an invalid library. As long as, that just means you probably have multiple libraries with some names, but as long as you're seeing the date and time on there, sometimes you'll get warnings. It's more warning note than a warning I can't proceed kind of thing. So sometimes you'll get notices that pop up, but you're still able to compile and upload. So as long as it didn't like stop the upload and you're able to see the date and time printed on the screen, then you're good.
I don't see the date and time.
Is it still just blinking the red and green lights on the board?
Oh, it's actually not blinking anymore.
Okay. So close your serial monitor and then reopen it.
Close the program?
No, just the serial monitor. Like you should have a window for just the serial monitor, and then you can like open it up again.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Are you seeing that now with the date and time? Okay. So you see what's on my screen, it says January 1st, 2000, and it's 27 minutes after midnight, and it's a Monday. So right now, I've been talking for 27 minutes since I plugged the battery into my Mayfly. Because as soon as we powered the battery or the clock with the battery, it started counting at midnight that time. So if we deployed our logger right now, we would be recording data with the wrong date on it. So this is the next part is where we're going to adjust this clock. But this is, again, this is the first time we're programming the Mayfly. So if you're able to get to this part and you've programmed it, then we should have no trouble for the rest of today's lessons. If you're not able to see the date and time on the serial monitor right now, then we've got to take the time to fix that so that we're all seeing this. So we're going to go ahead to the next step, and we'll do this one slowly just in case they're able to join us. But now what we need to do is tell it the appropriate time to adjust the clock for. So we're going to go up to File and Examples. And we're going to go back to that same branch that we were in earlier, the EnviroDIY DS3231. Earlier, you just clicked on the Now button. Now we want to click on the Adjust button, or for the Adjust sketch. And so what that does now is open up a sketch where you adjust the date and time and even the day of the week. I'm going to enlarge my window just a tiny bit. All right. So I assume everybody's got their adjust window open. Yeah, this sketch does not have flashing lights. So that's because this sketch was written not for a Mayfly, but for the actual chip that's on the clock, and you can put this chip on all sorts of different other boards. And the Mayfly is the only board out there that has a red and green light on them, and there are certain pins, and in order to turn the lights on and off, you have to say turn on pin 8 and pin 9 high and low, and you have to talk to the Mayfly to tell it to do that. And this is a generic sketch that will work on any board that's got this clock chip on it, not just a Mayfly. So we could make a specific Mayfly clock program, but we didn't. So we're just trying to use this because if for some reason you go buy a DS3231 clock, which other people sell these, you'll use this exact same sketch to program them. So this is kind of a universal programming sketch. So we're trying not to make this too specific to our board. Again, because I'm trying to give you tools so that you can do this again at a later date with other hardware and not necessarily exactly what we're working with here in this workshop. So you can see on the adjust sketch, the very middle of the first part of the page here talks about, it says date and time. You'll see there's like a string of numbers separated by commas in here. That's where you program the year, month, date, hour, minute, second. So it starts off with the biggest number first, and then it goes down from there. So it's kind of slightly different from the US here, where we usually have month, date, year. A lot of other countries do date, month, year. And here, the way we usually would do our recording with data files is that you start with the date first, the year first, I'm sorry, the year, then the month, the day, and then the hour, and then the minute, and then the second. So it's always starting from the highest number first and going to the right. And then the very last number, in this case, in the example that they were giving you, is a 5. So if you read the little comments right above it, the gray line, it says year, month, day, hour, minute, second, and weekday starts from 0 and goes to 6. So if you've ever done any computer programming or any work with computers, you might remember that counting always begins with 0 in the computer world. So if you have, 3 items, you're going to count 0, 1, and 2. If you've got 5 items, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so in our case, there's 7 days of the week, but you're going to start counting on Sunday, which is 0, and then you would end on 6, which is Saturday. So if we were programming the clock on a Sunday, then we would put a 0 in place of the 5, where it says the last number right in here. So you have to kind of go back up to the list and go, well, today's Thursday, so Sunday is 0, Monday's 2, 1, Tuesday's 2, Wednesday's 3, Thursday is 4. So we know that today is the 4th day of the week according to this thing. So that's a little bit kind of confusing. We're going to go ahead and change that last 5 to a 4, right? So now at least we're on the correct day of the week. This little clock chip is pre-programmed for leap years and all that, so it'll know that in certain years it will not have that extra day in February, and other years it will, but it doesn't know the correlation between a certain date and a day of the week, so that's why we have to program that. If you give that the wrong number, then if you notice on our board it thinks that January 1st, 2000 was a Monday, that's probably right, I guess, but it will not. You could tell January 1st was a Friday and it would be just fine with that. So you've got to make sure that you choose the right day of the week if you want everything to match up. So now what we need to do is manually type in the date that we want to set the clock for. And this is where you have to do a little bit of thinking ahead kind of and planning, and you actually set your board for a time in the future. So we're going to be time travelers. So in just a second, it's going to be 11 o'clock here. Well, it is. It's 11 o'clock exactly right now here in the East Coast. The problem is we sell these data loggers to people all over the world, and they're all sending data to our Monitor My Watershed web portal, which is also, it's even in a different time zone where they host the thing. So we originally designed our data systems to have everything on Eastern Standard Time because everything was here in Pennsylvania or New Jersey, and we didn't have to worry about time zones. But then we started programming loggers and doing work in Mountain Time Zone and Central Time Zone. And then we sent a bunch of data loggers to Bhutan on the other side of the world, and we had to send data that was like 12 hours ahead of us back to our data server, and that starts to get to be a real headache when it comes time to coordinate where all your data is coming from. So we've adopted the platform of programming everything with UTC time or GMT or Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Time, which is the time that it is in England right now. So the easiest way to get to that is on this website here that I'm sharing, time.gov. And that's a really handy website. They just updated it to make it look really cool and flashy. And it's a really neat website that's got this little handy chart that shows you which state is in what time zone and some of the states that don't use daylight savings time. So it tells you if you're in daylight or not. So that's kind of neat to see where you are if you're like programming your radio, the clock radio at your house or your microwave oven or something to match a time. But in our case, because we want to use UTC time, if you'll notice up in the upper right hand corner, there's a small little window up there that says Coordinated Universal Time UTC, and in this case it's 1500 or 15 hours, 2 minutes, and 19 seconds. So that's what time it is UTC wise, and that's the time that we're going to put on our data loggers so that we actually tell the data logger what time zone it's in, and then the data web server can handle that. And you'll see the website will show up and say, oh, well, it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, even though your logger thinks it's 1500. So we've got to program our data logger 5 hours ahead of us. Well, it's 5 hours. Also, it's 4 hours. Well, it's UTC minus 4 because you got the complicated issue of daylight savings time. So that's the other issue, is that UTC doesn't jump forward or back an hour in different times of the year. So it makes it a lot easier if we just program our clock to this one time zone that will never change, and then we can accommodate that later on the website if we really need it. So right now, we want to program our clock to be 15 hours. And we don't want to do 3 minutes because that just passed, right? So what we need to do is once we've uploaded the sketch to our Mayfly, every time the Mayfly boots up, like if we say, hey, set the time to 15:04 in 0 seconds, every time you restart the Mayfly and there's a reset button on the Mayfly, or if you just turn it off and back on again, every time you start up that sketch, it's going to reprogram the clock to be 15:04. So what we do is we set the clock ahead of time, and then when we get to, like, let's say 15:05 in a minute and 3 seconds, when we get to 15:05, we hit the reset button. The clock on the Mayfly reboots, and it says, hey, it's 15:05. And that's how we synchronize our Mayfly to match up with the UTC time. It doesn't have to be exactly on. If you're a few seconds off, it's not a big deal. Even if you're a minute or two off, it's not a problem. We just don't want to be horribly off at this point, because our chip on our cell board will go and synchronize this for us most of the time, but there are times where it doesn't. So we would like to make sure that we're pretty close so that when we're sending data to the internet, we're not accidentally sending data from 10 or 20 minutes in the future or 10 minutes in the past. So we want to be as close as possible starting off here until the clock is able to synchronize itself later. So if you want, you can open this website on your phone. I mean, if you've also got a phone, you can try to look at the clock. The problem with most phones is they don't display the seconds, so you don't know exactly which part of that minute you need to synchronize with. So you can go to this website on your phone, or open it on a browser, or just look at the one that I've got going up here in the corner. So while I've been talking, we've gone through a couple of minutes. It's now 15:05. So we want to program our clock to be, let's do like 15. We'll do 15:09, because I think mine's going to probably take a little bit. So we're going to go back here to date and time, and we're going to change the year from 2011. That's when somebody wrote this sketch, like 9 years ago. So that's just the default time that's in there. So we're going to change the year to 2020. And it's no longer November, it's May, so we're going to change the second number to the month, which is 5. Today is the 14th, so we're going to change the 10 to a 14. And oh, look at that, we're already in the right hour. It already thinks it's 15 hours, so that's pretty close. I'm going to put an 8 for the minute and 0 seconds, and we already programmed a 4 for the day of the week. So now in that, you should have 2020, 5, 14, 15, 8, 0, 4. And that is the new date and time string for programming your board. And I'm going to hit upload because mine takes a while and I've only got a minute and a half to get there. If you do it wrong and your clock is too slow, then you can just redo it. You can do this as many times as you want. You can program a Mayfly and reprogram a Mayfly hundreds or even thousands of times. So it's not like you will wear out the Mayfly if you have to reprogram it. So we've used some of our boards 10 and 20 times. We reprogrammed maybe 30 times in a workshop, and we've done 30 workshops. So you do the math there, that's 900 reprograms for one board. So it's really easy to change if for some reason you need to change something. So I'm just going to move this over just a tad. So if we look here, my window, once we get the sketch uploaded, we'll see the new date and time, and it's going to start counting at 15:08. And then when the website behind here also gets to 15:08, then we're going to hit the reset button. The reset button is right next to that red and green light. It's a small little white rectangle-y button. It looks kind of like a grain of rice. It's not the big black button that's next to the memory card. It's over next to the battery jack on the right-hand side of your Mayfly. And you can push it at any time. Like you can see now mine says 15:08 with 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds. And then if I push it, you'll see it starts counting now at 15:08 and 0 seconds. And so now we've got 10 seconds to go. And you want to push it about 2 seconds early. So it's 07 and 58, we're going to push reset, which is right now. So push your reset button. And now your Mayfly should be printing on your serial monitor pretty close within a second or two of 15:08, and now it says 11 seconds. If anybody didn't get that, then you can go back and change your minutes in your sketch to like 15 hours and 10 minutes or 11 minutes or something. You just give yourself some extra time in the future so that you'll, it takes from about a minute to upload and get everything squared away. So I always give myself 2 or 3 minutes to spare just in case things are not working right. So I assume now the thing is we don't want to restart your Mayfly anymore now that we've got the right time on, because if any time I restart my Mayfly or even close my serial monitor and reopen the serial monitor, it's going to reboot it and switch it back to 15:08 and 0 seconds again. So we don't want to touch anything now that we've got the time synchronized.
Shannon, Paul's indicating that he's about 10 seconds off.
That'll be okay. That's not a problem. If it's more than about a minute, then that'll be a problem later. So, and the sketch on the Mayfly later on, I'm not sure. I think it's for a while we were having it check every day. I think it may be like once a week it will go through and synchronize. So it's not always checking, but occasionally your Mayfly will check its time against the government time clock. If it sees there's a difference, it will adjust your clock for you. We're just doing this to get you in the ballpark right now so that when the first bunch of data points we collect here in the next sketch we want to make sure you're recording at least on the right day and appropriate or approximate hour and not January 1st, 2000. And again, this is also just to teach you how to program one of these clocks, because if you decide to do this later and you're not using a cell board, or you're in an area where you don't have cell coverage or you don't have an active data plan yet, you need to know how to program your clock so that your data logger is at the right time, because not everybody's going to be using this online synchronizing cellular option. All right, so hopefully everybody's clocks are still synchronized. If you look at your serial monitor and make sure that it matches, it's 15, 16, and 12 seconds right now. So hopefully everything is still synchronized. So what we need to do now is program it with something else so it's not going to, because if we reboot or open the COM window or do anything right now, it's going to go back to 15:08, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to go back to that now sketch that we did earlier, where it just prints out exactly whatever the clock thinks the time is, and I'm going to upload that sketch. So all I'm going to hit is the upload button on that sketch. You don't have to change anything, just hit upload on your now sketch again. And all this is going to do is print out the date and time. We're not adjusting anything, we're just seeing the raw date and time from the clock, and we're going to verify that everything is at the right time.
Tiffany, are you situated on that?
I think so. I should be good. It's just that I don't want to mess anything up, so I'm just looking at what Shannon's doing now.
Okay, just sounds like you're on track.
Yep. So we've still got 2 more big steps to do in the next 45 minutes. So we're going to have to kind of jump ahead. If anybody's having trouble, I think we'll have to catch up with after all of this, maybe during lunch or something. So now if you see it looks very similar to what we were printing out earlier, but we're running the now sketch and it says it's 15, 17, and 40 seconds. It matches the clock. So everything agrees. And I can hit restart, reset, turn off. I can set the Mayfly on a shelf now with no power and come back a year later and the clock is going to be within a few seconds. So everything is good now. We're synchronized and we're able to talk. Because yesterday all we did was get the temperature from the Mayfly. Now we're talking to the Mayfly from the laptop and then getting the time back. So we're doing 2-way communication now, which is very important for the next step, which is programming our CTD sensor. So does anybody have any other major issues here with the clock sync that we need to do? All right, so this is the part where we need to get your CTD sensor. And I think Dave mentioned yesterday not to drop it or bang it or poke it or anything, because this ceramic disc inside here is extremely fragile. And the sensor costs $500. So if you drop this on the desk while you're working with it, you could break it. Or if you decide to get curious and kind of poke it with a paper clip or a pencil or something, you'll break it. And we just want to make sure that we treat this very gently.
Shannon, Michelle has a question.
Okay.
Real quick, I was synced and then I shut the window and reopened the serial monitor, and now I'm back to the 1510 that I set it at.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Every time you open your serial port, it reboots the Mayfly, and so you should never close the serial monitor while we're doing the synchronizing, and that's why we want to leave it open while we upload the now. So you're going to want to go back to your adjust window, program it for maybe 1521. That's a minute and a half from now, and then at 1521, synchronize it, then upload your now sketch, and just keep your serial monitor open for the rest of today. We don't have to close it at all.
Okay.
All right, so while she's working on that, Michelle's seen these sensors before, so I don't need to give her the background on it. But because she knows what Dave was saying yesterday about if you're cleaning the sensor, we do have this nice scrub brush that everybody got in their box of their kits, and it's very handy for gently removing maybe some slime or snails or macroinvertebrates that make their home inside here. So you can use this to kind of clean off the outside of this, or maybe gently swoosh it in the water if you need to, but we don't want to be plunging it into water, and we don't want to be hitting this or dropping this. And we definitely don't want to install this, like don't put this on a zip tie on a rebar and then hammer the rebar into the stream. You would want to put something in the stream and then put this in and attach it under the water so that you're not hitting this with any, or you don't want to hit anything that's even connected to this, because you will damage it. I've used about 300 of these, and I have broken a few either in maintenance or curious cleaning. I think the very first one I ever got, I was kind of poking it with a stick and broke it. So that's why when I say don't do it, it's because I've broken plenty of these, and it's not a good feeling when you break your $500 sensor. So it's now 1521. Hopefully she's synchronized. Once you've got the boards matching, then hit the upload the now sketch before doing anything else. And then once we know that we're in the now sketch, we're going to be plugging in the sensor and doing some other stuff, and occasionally that will cause the board to reset. And then if we were still using the adjust sketch, then it would go back to that wrong time. So that's why we went back to the now sketch for this part. But once we plug in the sensor, we're going to program it to talk to the Mayfly properly. And then the next sketch after that is the actual logging sketch that uses the date and time and everything to transmit the data. So by the time, hopefully here at noon when it's time to eat lunch, your data logger will be transmitting the pressure, which is around 0 because it's not in water, but it will be transmitting your pressure, temperature, and connectivity from your table. So if you really wanted, you could go put this in a bucket of water during your lunchtime and actually see some data happening. So that's our goal. So I assume everybody, I was going to just kind of talking while everybody got caught up, and we've got all of our CTDs out. Now, in your bucket of parts, you had a small green board with one of those white Grove connectors on it, and then there's like it looks like a headphone jack that you might want to plug earbuds into, and that's exactly what it is. If you've noticed, the CTD sensor comes with a headphone jack on the end. It's very convenient. A lot of environmental sensors just have bare wires on them, and then you have to go in the field with a little screwdriver and kind of connect the wires to some sort of screw terminal. So it says, I'm just looking at Michelle, did you get your clock synced, or was that message from earlier?
I did get it synced, but my serial monitor screen looks slightly different than yours. I don't know if that matters or.
Well, did you upload the now sketch? Because the time that's printed on the adjust sketch looks different than the now sketch. So if you've just done we did now, then we did adjust, you got to go back and do now again. So do the now sketch.
but don't close out of anything. That's where I
No,
think
just leave it. You can leave it. You can go either if you've already, I would assume you still got it open. Maybe like in your taskbar, you can go back to the same now sketch you did earlier. Just go back and all you have to do is hit the upload button, nothing else. Yeah, it's a little confusing because you're not getting a lot of feedback on the serial monitor text that's flying by because it kind of looks the same, but I look at it and I'll be like, wait, have I synchronized this or am I doing the now sketch? Like it doesn't say now or whatever. It would be really nice if this sketch did something else, but this was written by somebody else and we're just trying to use a general clock syncing sketch and not necessarily our Mayfly one.
So to be clear, I'm in my now window.
Yep, hit the upload button. That's all you gotta do.
I hit upload, but then I went to tools, serial monitor, and
Don't touch serial monitor anymore. Leave the serial monitor the way it was. Every time you close and open serial monitor, it's going to go back to the time that you put in your adjust sketch. There's no reason to close serial monitor for the rest of today. It can stay open forever.
I didn't close it, but I guess that's where my serial monitor screen looks different than yours. I'm just seeing.
What is it printing a time on your screen at all?
It has the time and the date. It just doesn't have like 2025-14. Like it doesn't have. It just looks different. Like it has 15/25/14. Like it has the time right and the day, but it doesn't have.
I'm guessing that's the.
Oh wait, there it is. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there is a good 30-second or 45-second delay, and the previous stuff will be on the screen until it renews with the newer sketch. All right. So you're asking where to get the now sketch. If you go up to File and Examples and scroll all the way down the list to where you see EnviroDIY DS3231. And that's the DS3231 is the part number of the clock chip that we use. And so if you want to look at the temperatures printing out or adjust it or you find out what time it thinks now, that's where you would get those now and adjust. But if your clock's not right, we can skip that part and you can just hope that your cell card is activated and your clock should synchronize later on once we do that session. So right now what we need to do is talk to this CTD sensor using the Mayfly. So because the environmental sensor companies use this handy headphone jack, I invented this little board here, which is just a headphone jack to Grove jack connector adapter board. So you can easily plug your green headphone jack onto the end of your sensor. So go ahead and do that. And then in your box of parts, we had these 20-centimeter Grove cables. They're exactly the same on both ends. It doesn't matter which end you use because they're exactly the same and they're polarized. They have little tabs on them, so you can't put them in the wrong way. So just take one of the little jacks and plug it in the only way that it will go into the socket on the end of the sensor board. And remember, as we're using the Mayfly, to keep it on your desk and not on anything conductive, metal or liquid. Don't put it on a MacBook or anything else, because this is the part where people start plugging things into the Mayfly and they put it somewhere convenient, like on a Mac. You got that nice big flat level surface that you can put it on. And I've done it before, which is why I warn people, because a little smoke comes out and things get hot and it doesn't work after that. So so that's why I'm reminding you as we're plugging things in to keep your Mayfly on something that's not going to short anything out. So now that we've got our CTD sensor connected to our Grove cable, if you remember yesterday when we were talking about, there's 6 little white connectors on the bottom of a Mayfly that are these Grove connectors for connecting a variety of sensors or devices. You can plug this into any one of these 6 jacks and it will go in there just fine, but it's not going to work on 5 of them. It only works on 1 because we configured the board to talk to the sensor on 1 jack, which is the D67 jack which if you look, I'm showing it here on my screen on the camera. It's the, and if you look very carefully, it's one of the ones in the middle, and there's a D6-7 next to it. Right next to it is also a D10-11 socket. We don't want to use that one. We want to use the D6-7 socket. So just plug the Grove cable in and make sure you seat it all the way down to where it won't really like click, click, but you'll feel it go in nice and firm. And you should be good. These Grove cables are just friction locked. So they do make Grove cables with a little tab that kind of locks it in so nothing will yank them out. But I don't like to use those because they do tend to pull on things a little too much. So we usually use the unclipped ones. So as long as you've got your sensor plugged into your Grove cable and your Grove cable in the D6-7 jack, then your mayfly is ready to go. Did somebody have a question? All right, so we talked a little bit yesterday about the types of sensors and the sensor, I think somebody was talking about analog sensors and all the different types of protocol that you can use to talk to a mayfly. The sensors that we like to use a protocol called SDI-12. It stands for Serial Digital Interface at 1200 baud, which is an old protocol that a lot of environmental sensors have used for decades. And it's really convenient because you can talk to up to 62 different sensors all on the same wire. And in order to do that, you have to give each one of your sensors a different address. So it's kind of like right now, we've got a Zoom room full of 20 cameras here, no, 16. I got 16 cameras going on here, but I can keep you all straight because each one of your windows has a name associated with it, right? So when these sensors come from the factory, they all have an address of 0. And that's a generic address, and it doesn't quite talk to the mayfly the way we need it to. We've got to give it something other than a 0. We've got to give it either a 1 or 2 or 3, all the way up to number 9, or we could do a capital letter A through Z, or we could do a lowercase letter A through Z. But the convenient part there is that now we could put 10 CTDs on this, on one mayfly, or we could put 10 soil moisture sensors on one mayfly, or 2 CTDs, 1 soil moisture, and 1 oxygen. So, and we've done that before. We've put 10 different sensors, all of 10 different varieties, but as long as you give them all a different address, then they can all talk to the mayfly at the same time. And that you can buy like a little adapter that allows you to plug different, more than one jack into the same socket. So there's different ways to branch that out. We can talk about that in the afternoon session. So the reason I'm going into all that is to explain why we need to do this next step, which is we're now in lesson 2, which is to talk about changing the channel number of the CTD sensor that we've got. If we try to operate the data logger now, it's not going to work right because your CTD sensor isn't configured to talk to the mayfly at the appropriate channel number. So we've got this adjust window open. We got the now window. You can close a couple of them if you want. You can leave it open, doesn't matter. I'm just going to close them so that they're not cluttering up my screen too much. But as long as you've got one Arduino window open, we're going to go back to our example menu. And if you've accidentally closed your Arduino program completely, just open it back up. That's not a problem. But we're going to want to go to the examples. And down in the section where we had, remember we saw the EnviroDIY DS3231, that's where we got that sketch from. We're going to go up a couple of 5 or 6 menus to this thing called Arduino-SDI-12. And I'm just kind of leaving it on the screen there so hopefully everybody sees it. This is where you program your Arduino to talk to an SDI-12 sensor. This is a bunch of libraries that we wrote at the Stroud Center a few years ago because it used to require an interface chip that would go between your sensor and your mayfly. And we figured out a way to talk natively to an SDI-12 sensor directly from the mayfly, which saves you money and hardware and extra complication. So in this Arduino STI12 example folder, there's a sketch. It's called B_address change. So the name kind of gives it away, but that's what we need to do, is change the address of the sensor. So if you click on that, it opens up this B address change sketch. And the reason it's just B is that we put everything in, if you write it, it puts everything in numeric, or excuse me, alphabetical order inside that folder. So the B just means it's the second thing on the list. So it's the address change sketch for our STI12 sensors. And I'm not going to get into the details of what's going on here, but it's written for a mayfly so that it will, on pin 7, which is why we're using the D67 jack, talk to a mayfly and ask it, what address are you currently at? And then it gives you the option to change the address to something else. So the one complicating factor here is, if you see here on line 53, the serial baud rate is 115200. Remember yesterday when we first turned on the mayfly, we were just getting a bunch of weird characters on the screen, and that was because our baud rate of the mayfly's serial monitor was set to 9600. And we had to change that to 57600 so that we could actually see the regular words coming through and not the weird little symbols. So this address change sketch is even faster than what we've been doing. So when we upload this sketch, we're going to see a bunch of weird stuff on the screen. And so we're going to want to change the baud rate of our serial monitor, because the next sketch we do is programming the logger is also at this speed. So it's just something to point out. So if you ever are using an Arduino board and you're getting strange characters on the screen, check your speed to make sure that you're running at the right rate. So all I'm going to do is hit the upload button. We're not changing the address change sketch at all. We're just using it as it is. So I've still got I haven't disconnected anything. My COM port's still the same. I've had my serial monitor open for the last hour now. I haven't done anything to change anything. All I'm doing is hitting the upload button, and we're now going to reprogram the mayfly. Instead of having the now sketch, we're now putting on the address change sketch. And this one's going to take a little bit longer because it's got some extra libraries and files associated with it. So on mine, it's going to take here about a minute. On yours, it'll probably take 30 to 45 seconds. So mine's still compiling. And we could get into all sorts of programming lessons about what compiling means and what the sketches look like and how to edit your sketches, but everything that we're providing you has already been pre-written, and there's not any, there's no real need to delve into a lot of programming. All right, so now I have uploaded this sketch, and you can see I've got a bunch of weird squiggly things on my serial monitor. So I'm just going to go down to the speed at the bottom right-hand corner where it just says 57600, and I'm going to change that to 115200. And once I've done that, now I get some handy little prompts that come up to the screen and says it's opening the STI12 bus, which is the pin that we've got the sensor connected to. It says checking for address 0. Oh, occupied. And then it says sensor active at address 0. If you had 2 or 3 sensors there, it would actually tell you that there's more than one, or if they were on different addresses, it would tell you that also. But because your sensor came directly from the factory, they all come with a 0, and we're going to have to change them. So in my case, I had 6 sensors that I put in. I wanted to call them 1 through 6, so I would plug them in, change from 0 to 1, and then the next sensor I'd go from 0 or 2 or 0 to 3. So you just rename each one. And it's kind of handy if when you've got more than one, you put like some tape on it or label it somehow so you keep track of what numbers the different sensors are. So I assume everybody's got this. You've got a thing on your screen saying that your sensor is 0. Yeah, I see Paul's thumb. Michelle's got it. Levi's got it. Rob and Zach, are you getting the 0 on the screen? Oh, very good. Tiffany, are you able to get this? All right. So what you're doing now is you've actually talked with your Mayfly to a CTD sensor. Your sensor, all it's doing right now is saying, hey, I'm at channel 0. But that means you've got all your hardware connected properly and everything's working great. So what we need to do is change to channel 1 instead of channel 0. And the only reason we're using 1 is because the sketch we're going to do next has been pre-written to talk to a CTD with a channel of 1. If for some reason we wanted to pick another one, we could do that too. But everything's been written for 1. So we need to change that to 1. So this is the next step, is something we haven't had to do yet, which is to talk back to your Mayfly using the serial COM window, or the serial monitor. So up here at the very top of your COM window, there's a long white bar, and then there's a send button on the far right-hand side. We haven't had to do anything with that yet, but this is where you actually talk back to your Mayfly. So you notice the prompt here said enter new address, so it wants you to tell it what address to use. So the cursor is not normally up there. You got to put your mouse up in that long white box and click on it, and then you'll see you've got a blinking cursor in that box. And then just push button number 1, number 1 on your keyboard, and then go over to the right-hand side of your serial monitor window, and then hit the send button, and that will send the character 1 to your Mayfly, and then your Mayfly will take that and program your CTD with the new address. So then you should get, it'll say success, rescanning for verification. It will say address 0 is vacant, and then it will say checking address 1, oh, occupied, and then it will say sensor is active at address 1. And if everybody gets that, then we're doing great and we're ready to move on to the next step. Is anybody not getting, it's like Zach's doing great. Everybody getting channel 1 for their sensor? Michelle has a question.
Sorry, I did get all of that in the message, but then the last line says not a valid address, please enter, and then it has a list of a bunch of things.
Yeah, go back up and just hit 1, just the character 1, and then the send button. It might not have taken, if there was an extra space or an extra thing in there, it might not have taken it.
Paul is saying he's having the same problem as Michelle.
I just copied into the chat what it's saying. So it says like literally everything that you have, and then just that under the last line of enter new address, that's what it says, not a valid.
Well, try typing in something other than 1, maybe like 2 or 5,
Okay.
or an A or a letter, just anything, see if it'll take it. You guys are using a newer version of the CTD. I'm using one from a year ago. It could be that there's some slight voltage changes, or somehow there's something different in the way that the meter group. Yeah, there's no space. All you got to do is in your bar at the top, hit a 1 and then a send.
I tried 2 and 3, and I'm getting the same message. Would you suggest I try maybe a letter?
See, if I go 2 and then a space and then enter, it gives me not a valid.
I'm just hitting. I'll try 2 again. I'm just typing 2. That's it. I'm not doing any spaces, and it's not. I'm getting the same not valid address.
Shane, I have the same problem as well, Rob.
See, I'm able to go to 1 and 4 as long as I only have a single character and there's no. I've gone to 7. I can make it an A. I can do yeah, so we're all using the same sketch. Do we need the quote? No, there's no quotes. It's just the number 1. There shouldn't be anything in the white box other than a single character. It can be a letter or a number, nothing else.
But it does say above that sensor is active at address 1. That's right above the enter new address. So.
Oh, so it is saying it's active at 1 then?
Yeah, just above, it says enter new address. And then right above that, it says sensor active at address 1.
Okay. Well, it was 0 earlier. So as long as it says sensor active at address 1, then you're good. Then I wouldn't touch it. Don't do anything else. Somehow you were able to get it to trick it into going to channel 1. We've done this a lot with all of our older sensors, and I never had a problem. I don't have the other thing handy here. If you're going to be doing this a lot, the meter group will actually sell you a handy little box that is for $60. It's a small interface that just has a headphone jack on it, and you plug it in and you put an app on your cell phone, and then you can configure the channel numbers and stuff using an app on your phone. So you wouldn't even have to do this step. So, but it costs $60. So we were trying to save you $60 by not making you buy a channel changer device and just using your Mayfly to change these. So, so yeah, as long as you see what I have, the last line on my screen, which is checking address 1, occupied, sensor active at address 1. If you're able to get it to that, then don't do anything else, because I would hate for it to go to 2 or some other thing.
So then do you suggest I just go back to sensor 1 and just go with that, even though it's not a valid address?
Yeah, it should be 1. It will not work on channel 0. The way channel 0 works is as soon as you've applied power to the sensor will dump out a whole bunch of a serial string of numbers, and it's not SDI-12 format. So our sketch for talking to a sensor will not work if it's stuck in channel 0. So you can see on mine, if I do a 3 or if I do a 4 or something, if I do any character, and yeah, it looks like it's still working as long as if I do a 1 and then a space and say send, it will change it to 1, but then I'll still get an error. And I think it's because you're not just sending a 1, you're sending a 1 and then a carriage return, or a return, like the command for a return. You can also try just hitting like 1 and hitting the return button on your keyboard, or you can hit the send button, either one. I think what's happening is that you're sending it the number 1, and then you're also sending it some other stuff, and it does them both separate. So like if you sent 1, 2, 3, it would probably do 1 and then 2 and then 3, and then it would give you an error for the last one or something. So yeah, just for fun, I'm going to see if I say 12, what does it do? Yeah, it sets it to 1, and then it ignores the 2 and then the other stuff. So I think maybe your Windows is sending something else. But as long as it will tell you what the active address is. And as long as it's saying 1, if you've been able to trick it into getting to channel 1, then we're good to go. Can also try something besides a 1. Just try an A or just any single digit besides a 0 and see if you can get it. The sensor I'm using now is maybe 2 years old, and yours is about 2 weeks old. So it could be that they've changed something in how they program their sensors so that it doesn't respond exactly to this command anymore. We had asked the company if they would pre-configure these to channel 1 for us, and they said they couldn't do that. They didn't have the ability to configure these based on how they process their orders and ship things. So we were hoping to make this a little easier for everybody. Looks like Zach said, I got to enter. You entered 1 twice, and then it went from 0 to 1. So is there anybody who's still stuck on 0? All right, so everybody was able to trick it somehow into channel 1 then? Levi, are you on 1 or 2 or 0?
I'm still stuck on 0. I haven't been able to get it to move.
All right, try typing 11 or 1 space 1 or multiple versions of having 1s in there and see if it will somehow trick it into that. So I guess Levi, you're the one that you don't have the, is it still on 0?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll try to work with you in a minute on getting yours to go too. So for those of you who've got your kits, we've got to get all the other parts and pieces together before we can do the actual online transmitting portion of the sketch. So if you go back to your bucket of parts, in the little bag where we had the battery, you should have this tiny little SD card adapter. This is the thing I was showing yesterday. This is the small little 8-pin board that plugs into your Mayfly that allows you to connect a memory card vertically onto your Mayfly. And it only fits on your Mayfly in one direction. It goes in the corner next to where the button was for, there's like a little user button. It's a little black push button next to the big silver memory card socket.
Shannon, if you stop sharing your screen, it might be bigger for everyone to see.
You're right. It looked big on my screen because I've got it pinned on my other one. So yeah, let me, since we're done programming, we don't need our program window open until later. So you just plug that in. It only goes in one way because it would bump into the switch the other way. So make sure there's 8 pins that has to go into 8 sockets. So it's kind of a 4x2 kind of thing. It's like a little Lego. But be very careful. If you push it in at an angle, you will break the pins either on the socket or the pins that are on the back of the board. They're just lightly soldered on there, and too much force one way or the other will cause them to snap off. But once you've got these in there, we're going to leave that in for the rest of eternity. There's no reason to ever remove this now that we've got it in there.
Shannon, can you demonstrate that?
What, plugging it in?
Yeah.
No, my finger's bigger than the board, so it would just cover it all up. But basically, it just goes in the tiny little board or the tiny little socket, and it just plugs in until everything is nice and flush. So once you've done that, your Mayfly is ready to accept the memory card. So in your bag, we've given you a giant looking memory card. This is the SD card adapter. This is the adapter that you would use to plug your memory card into, like maybe the card reader socket of your laptop or a USB card reader adapter or something like that. But the actual memory card for the Mayfly is the super tiny little micro SD card. And I believe you guys got 8 GB cards. It used to be we would use 2 GB cards, and then it was actually too expensive. The smaller cards cost more than the bigger cards. So now we usually include 8 GB cards. And I think you might have 2 in your kits. We gave you 2 so that you have 1 in the field and then 1 in your office. And when you go out to the woods to do your data logger retrieval, you bring your empty card with you and you remove the full card, put the empty card in, bring the full one back to your office. It saves you from having to take a laptop in the field to download the stuff. So you've got 2 cards. We only need 1. You don't need to put a card in the longer flat memory socket. We're only going to put 1 card in the vertical adapter that we just put on. So we've already got our CTD connected to our board. We've got our memory card socket connected. Now we've got to plug in the cell phone board. So this is the part that is, I just dropped mine. This is a broken one, so it doesn't matter. I usually only use dead parts for demonstrations because I do have a tendency to either drop them or bend pins while I'm not being careful. The back of this board has 20 little tiny gold pins, and they're very easy to break, and they're very easy to bend and get them at a weird angle. Yeah, you can go ahead and put your memory card, put 1 memory card in your logger. When you are plugging this cellular board into the next little board, you got to look and make sure all of these 20 pins are going into the right sockets and they are not being bent or put in the wrong place. So in your bucket of parts, you should have also gotten this big green triangular board. You'll notice that they all have these like mitered 45-degree angle edges on the tops of them. That's to kind of orient them in the same direction. It's a standard footprint that it's called a B device, BEE. And they all have this like angled top to keep you oriented in the right direction. So this is a B adapter. It's even printed on there, LTE B, 4G LTE B adapter. We sell these on Amazon by themselves, but we included them in your kit because you need this board to go in between the Mayfly and the blue cellular LTE board. This is the board that the small blue board is the one we're going to put our SIM card in and hook our antenna to in a minute, but we've got to have this green adapter in the middle. So the easiest thing to get started is to put your cell board on your green adapter before you connect it to the Mayfly, because it's easier to double check. You kind of put it together and look and make sure there's 10 pins on one side and 10 on the other. And so you kind of look around before you snap it down to double check that all the 10 pins are going into the 10 holes and that you don't have them offset a little too high, too low, or sideways at an angle. And then once everything looks good and square and flush and straight, then you just gently push them down until you don't see the gold pins anymore. And it's nice and flat and flush and nothing is bent sideways and there's no pins sticking out. Okay. This cellular board costs $70. So we ought to be careful that we don't bend the pins or break something because you can't repair that easily and you have to get a new one. So once you've got that plugged in, it should look like a small blue board plugged into a medium-sized green board, right? And then we're going to take this bigger green board and plug this into the Mayfly using the exact same technique of lining up. This one's a little bit harder now because you can't quite see the pins because they're hidden. That's why I wanted you to practice by doing it with this one first. You've got to double check that the 10 pins of this adapter board line up with the 10 sockets on the Mayfly. I can't really show a good video because it's kind of hidden up under there, but that's why you just kind of spin it around, look at it, make sure you can see exactly how those 10 pins work.
So Shannon, we're doing this hot with the power off?
Good question. I was just thinking, if you really wanted, you could turn it off, but if you guys feel like you know what you're doing, you can just plug it in the way it is. If you really want to be safe, you can just turn off your Mayfly and even unplug it from the USB jack if you really wanted. Depends on how comfortable you are with this. Paul's done this before, so he can do this in the dark with his eyes closed almost. I've tried doing this. Yeah, so beveled edge does go towards the USB cable. You'll notice there's the triangular edge of the B adapter matches. There's a slight angular triangle pattern printed on the Mayfly board, and there's the angled edges of the Mayfly. So the idea that when I designed all the boards and parts and pieces was to make all of the angles kind of match up. If you plug it the other way, it just looks kind of not right. So hopefully that will it kind of makes symmetric sense when you look at it that way. All right, so then double check by looking from all angles and making sure you don't see any pins that didn't make it into the little black connectors. All right, so is everybody getting that, it looks like? All right, now the cellular board itself will not operate unless it's got power. So, well, actually, before we put that in, I think it's probably a good time to put the SIM card in. So, if you've got your hologram card from yesterday, on the card, you've got this kind of perforated area. There's a large SIM card, then a medium size, and then there's a super tiny one. And so what you can do is kind of push in and you'll break out one of the little inside cards. In this case, it's a really big card. I need the smallest one possible. So there's like a second level so that you end up with the world's tiniest card. It's just basically the little gold pads that are on the back of the card. That's all we need. So you'll end up with a hole in your SIM card that looks like that. And then you might end up with the tiny little frame around it. You don't need this frame, so if you break it getting it out, that's okay. It's hard to break this entire SIM card. So you end up with a tiny card. It's got the little numbers printed on it and the gold pads on the back. and that's all we need. So it's okay if some of that plastic stuff breaks off in the process. And then we're going to insert the SIM card into the cellular B, and the SIM card has a slight bevel on the edge of that, and that goes in first, just kind of like a memory card. So you're going to want to insert it with the bevel first and the label facing up. So I'll show you, that's what it looks like with the label and the numbers facing up. And then you just insert it, and it's kind of spring loaded. It might go in all the way the first time, or it might just go in part way, but it's a click to seat kind of a thing. So if it doesn't go in all the way, you gotta push it. If it goes all the way in the first time, that's great. But as long as it goes in and seats down, so there's barely any of the SIM card sticking out. Is everybody getting that? All right. And that little number that's printed on the tiny SIM card is the exact same number that's printed on the bottom. It's just they broke it into 2 lines, but it's the same number that's on the main card. So you want to keep this around for your reference so that if you need to add money to your card or do anything else, you remember what those numbers are so you don't have to go out to the field and try to read them off of that. And then we want to install the antenna. This is that small black plastic flexible dealie that we had earlier with the small black cable. And this is the last step we're going to do, and then we're going to take our lunch break before we power up the rest of the board. So we're going to take the small gold tip of the antenna, and it's going to connect to one of these 2 gold sockets on the very top of the cell board. And you'll notice one of them says CELL for cell, and the other one says 2.4. So there's different antennas you can put on this depending on what you're going to do. Because we're just using the cellular mode of this, we're going to attach this antenna to the left-hand side of it, the side closest to the USB jack that says cell, because we're just using this as a cellular antenna. So it kind of works best if you you got to make sure that you don't unseat the mayfly. If you push too hard on the edge of this board, you'll end up kind of seesawing the whole thing. So you want to kind of, while holding the B with your left hand, or whichever hand that you want to use your strongest hand to actually insert the antenna. So use your non-dominant hand to hold the B securely sandwiched onto the mayfly. And then you want to take this small gold adapter and stick it very carefully onto the top of the cellular module, and then push it down. It takes a little bit of force to push it down. You don't want, if you're really cranking on it and pushing down really hard and it's not going, don't do that, because you're probably in the wrong spot and you end up bending some pins. So it should go on with a little bit of force, but you don't need to like really smash it on. And once it's on there good, then you're able to kind of move the antenna gently around and it won't pop off. If you kind of gently tug on it and it pops right off, then you didn't get it securely on there. But once you've got it on, it should be nice and flat. It won't be at an angle. It should be at a nice square level angle with the top of the board. So if I can move it around different places and it doesn't pop off and it still stays good. It's very easy to put it on kind of halfway and then it will snap off the first time you go to flex it at all. So has everybody got their antenna on their cell board? Levi, looks great. Zach, good. Robert.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think Paul's seen these before. I don't know if he's ever had to connect one. He's got it this time. That's great. I think all the other ones, we probably snapped them on beforehand. It's good to know how to snap this on. I could have done this beforehand and sent it to you, but yeah, I see you, Paul. Good job. occasionally, if you're in the box bumping things around, you might accidentally disconnect this antenna in the future. So knowing how to snap this back on yourself is kind of important, because we've had people call us up and say, I accidentally bumped my antenna and I don't know what to do with it. Which hole does it go on and how do I snap it back on? So this is something that is one of those maintenance issues that is good to be aware of, so that you can snap that back on in the future if you need. So now you've got a cellular bee connected to a cellular adapter plugged into your Mayfly, and your Mayfly has a card adapter with a card on it, and you've got your CTV plugged in to the bottom. So all we have to do now is the last part, which is after lunch, we're going to do it now. We'll hook up the big, gigantic lithium battery to the board, and then we got to put a little jumper thing on. And then once we've uploaded the sketch, you'll be transmitting your data live to your data website. So that'll be the first thing we do when we get back. And then after that, then we talk about how we take this and put it inside the Pelican case to waterproof it and all that. So we should be able to get that all done with not a problem in the afternoon. It was just the last like 10 minutes of uploading the last sketch, but we're going to talk about that after lunch. Do we have any quick questions before we break? We're going to give it an hour and a half.
Do we connect power to the B board there?
No, not yet. We're going to save that for afterwards.
Okay.
Because there's no reason to put power on. If you turn it on now, then your B is going to come on. There's nothing to control it because we haven't uploaded the B control sketch. You'll probably just be sitting there draining your battery for the next hour and a half. So we want to make sure that we've got the proper sketch loaded before we connect the B power. That's a good question.
Thanks, Shannon.
Anybody else have a quick question before lunch? Nope. All right. So
everyone else can disable, can either stay on the call and disable audio.
Yeah, you can mute your stuff, and we'll mute you and turn off your video, and yeah, just be back here at like 1:30, and sounds great.
All right, we are recording. Take it away, Shannon.
All right. So I hope everybody had a good lunch. We got all of the folks who were having trouble, I think, up to speed with us. 3 or 4 people stayed on after we went to lunch. And we got all of them to the same point as everyone else. And then Zach ran over to Bob's and got his sensor squared away, thanks to that tip with the line ending portion of the Arduino window. Looks like I don't see any other things going on. So I guess everybody should be at the same point, which is we've got all of the cell hardware connected to our board. We've got our sensor configured properly. Now all we have to do is get the Mayfly to read the sensor data from the CTV and then transmit it to the internet. Because your cell card has been activated, once we get to that step, your data should end up on the Monitor My Watershed website. So I think the easiest thing that we're going to do first is to go to, you're going to need to go to your web browser and go to Monitor My Watershed, which is where we all went yesterday. If you saved your login information, it may remember you from yesterday. In my case, it did, because I checked the box that said keep me logged in. If you're not logged in, if you've gone to the version where it just says sign up on the main page and you don't have your username up there in the upper right hand corner, remember that upper right hand stuff may be hidden behind the Zoom windows, so you might have to move some windows around. But make sure you are logged in, because we need to go to the site that you created yesterday. And each one of you who created a site, you've got special information that only you can view. I can view it also because I'm the administrator and I can see everybody's little codes for their sensors. But you can't see anyone else's other than the one that you created. So I'm going to go to My Sites, which is up in the upper left-hand corner. You get the three menus. You got My Sites, Browse Sites, and Time Series Analyst. So I clicked on the My Sites tab, and that takes me to the website monitormywatershed.org/sites. and that's where it lists all of the sensor sites that I have installed in the last few years that we kind of use internally for our stuff that we didn't assign to some station owner. So if you remember, I created it's kind of hidden by my, here we go. You can, it even tells you the registration date of when the sites were created. And you can see I registered one on May 13th at 5:30. Well, we weren't doing a workshop at 5:30 yesterday, were we? So remember, this is all keeping track in a different time zone. So it gets a little confusing sometimes, but you got to remember it's not always Eastern time because other people are viewing this this data from all over the world. So I've clicked on my website. You guys will want to click on your individual site. I'm going to open up another tab here real quick just to, I'm going to browse. Don't do this part. I'm just going to browse because I'm going to see. I was looking this morning at the map of all the sites. Hopefully you're on the page that where you entered. You should see the little tiny map of your site with the listing of the station owner and your latitude and longitude. And I'm going to zoom in. You guys are all up in the same general area, so it's easy to see you on a map. I see there's some new stations that got added that you'll see. We've got one here just north of Ellenville up in, is Minehole Brook is a small stream up in the, I guess, the Schwagunk area, just down the hill from the State Park Preserve that's up there. So it looks like there's this station here, Summer 1220. We've got Bob Major's site, looks like, and then there's Galley Hill Road, Boshakill. So are those a couple of sites that some of you put in? I think a couple of those. I'm not sure about it. I could click on them and see who the actual owner is, but we got those a couple of sites. Looks like there's a couple here in the Newton area that probably belong to Michelle. And I see there's two gray ones in Paul's area, and I'm guessing maybe one or two of the ones he's got here. So that looks pretty good. So workshop Ben put one there. That's great. So yeah, so these gray sites, the gray means that a site has been created, but there's no data for it. The green means that it's been transmitting data for at least that we've heard from it in the last like 6 or 12 hours, something like that. If it's red, that means we haven't heard from it in more than a couple of weeks. If it's yellow, it means it's somewhere between like a few days and a few weeks. So it's handy for looking at a map and seeing, see, you can see there's a light green here, there's kind of a yellow hiding over there. So some of these stations are not actually online. They're ones somebody created as a placeholder, but there's not actually data there. So, and a couple of these have been moved around or turned off and put in storage. So there's no data logger in the field, but there's still a mark on the map because we have historic data for that site. So in just a little bit, once we start transmitting data, when you go to this main website, these gray dots will turn green because now you're sending live data. So that's one way to get to your site is to click on it from this map or have gone to the My Sites button. So as you can see, I've got mine on my site. So I've just been kind of talking, hoping everybody has navigated to this page and just gotten logged in and they're able to see their site. I'm still not able to, let's see. I used to be able to see everybody's window over here, but for some reason it went away.
Shannon?
Yep.
We were cut off for a while. We lost our internet for about 10 minutes.
Just
So-
now, or?
About last 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We might first 5 minutes of the presentation.
All right. Well, I was just kind of giving you an overview of this Monitor My Watershed website, making sure everybody was at the same place.
Okay.
Yeah, so Bob, you just want to navigate to Monitor My Watershed, click on My Sites, and then bring up your site that you registered yesterday.
Okay. My site, okay, yeah.
All right, I just had to do a bunch of Zoom wrangling on my other computer to get all the windows right. So I know you guys are probably all battling the same thing I am doing, which is trying to make sure you can see what you're doing, my shared screen, and then you probably got your windows of whatever window you've got going with your browser window, and just navigating the Zoom stuff on your computer is a challenge enough, let alone trying to program circuit boards while doing this. So I appreciate you all bearing with us, because I've been doing this for a couple of months now with the Zoom windows, and it's still, buttons are not where you think they should be, and it's just hard getting everything situated. So what we're going to do is we need to take some information from this website and put it in our Mayfly code so that the Mayfly knows which site to send data to. Right now, the code that's on your computer that we're going to open up in just a second does not know anything about your station. So we've got to customize your code, and we're going to be doing that with this custom UUID list that we're going to look at in just a minute. So what we need to do is go back into your Arduino window. If you haven't closed it in a while, you might want to do that, like close your serial port, close all the stuff, because especially if your computer went to sleep during lunch, or you disconnected your COM port or anything like that, it's going to cause some hiccups when it comes time to program this thing. So sometimes it's good to just close out all of your Mayfly or all of your Arduino windows. I'm going to do it just for good measure too. So I've now closed all of my Arduino windows, and I'm going to go back and restart it so that I'm making sure I don't have multiple windows open, or that it's trying to remember something from earlier.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, hang on, Levi, you just asked, when you change a sketch, you make any changes at all to what's on your computer, before you close something, the computer is going to say, hey, do you want to save this before you close it? Just like if you had a Word document and you make some changes, Windows is double checking whether or not you want to save something. Don't save your time, and that you actually won't be able to because of where it's at. But it's going to ask you on your adjust sketch from this morning, do you want to save the changes? And just say no, because we don't need to overwrite the time. Because the next time you want to adjust something, you're going to use a new time anyway. So don't save any changes to the now or the channel changing thing or the adjust. But we will save some changes in just a minute when we are doing the actual auger sketch. But don't save any changes to the adjust sketch. Was there another question from somebody?
I had a question about the save. So I'm getting prompted that they're marked as read only.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't save any of those libraries anyway, so don't attempt to save any of your change or any of the other sketches. Just say no.
So just cancel the save.
Yeah, don't even try to save.
I'm sorry, and that was on all three windows?
Yeah, on now and change, address change and adjust and all that, just X them all out and close all of your Arduino windows, and don't worry about saving.
But you have a box up. Should we bring up our box that says V_?
No, it's just the way it works is with Arduino, when you open up the program, it's going to bring up the last sketch that you had open.
Okay.
So depending on if you had change, if the now sketch was the last sketch, then you closed it. When you start up Arduino, it's going to bring up now again. It always brings up the most recently used sketch because they think they're being handy by saying, hey, remember you were working on this last time you quit. You want to keep going. It's sometimes nice, but it's also sometimes kind of annoying because you don't want to make changes to your existing sketch sometimes. But this morning when we first started opening Arduino, we always got that like May 14th sketch. That's because we've never had a sketch open before. So it just started with a blank one. All right, so now we've got some sort of window open, doesn't matter what it is. We need to open the actual data logger sketch. So if you go back to where we were earlier, where you go down to the fifth, up to file, and the fifth item on the list is examples. we're going to scroll down just like we did last time. And we're like way down in the list, we use that EnviroDIY DS3231. That's where we changed the clock using those examples. But we need the next one on the list, which is EnviroDIY modular sensors. And there's like a dozen examples. And modular sensors is the name of a big group of libraries that we wrote at the Stroud Center for talking to a variety of different sensors using a mayfly. So you can see there's examples in here for barometers. There's ones for saving data. There's SIT-SCI one. There's LTE. There's one for no cellular if you were using this with no cell board. There's two different monitors. There's logging to Monitor My Watershed. There's a ThingSpeak, which is another website you can transmit to. There's simple logging and some other sensors and some tools. So what we want to be using is the fifth one down on the list, DRWI_LTE. So this is an example sketch that's going to use the LTE, which is the 4G cellular board that's on your board and is kind of configured for our DRWI efforts here. And since you guys are all part of that, you can use that sketch. And it's kind of configured for transmitting the data right to Monitor My Watershed. So I'm just going to click on that link. I've left it open just so you can see which one I'm clicking on. But we're in EnviroDIY, modular sensors, and then clicking on DRWI_LTE. All right. Now I'm going to close that address change window just because I don't need that anymore. I just don't have too many windows open. So now I have opened up the DRWI_LTE sketch. Does everybody have that? Looks like Paul's good. Michelle's nodding. Rob's got a thumb. He's good. Did we? Oh, yeah, Levi's here.
Tiffany and Bob.
I'm not. Oh, maybe my window.
Yes, we're good.
All right. Where's Levi? Is he in here? No, I mean Zach. Did Zach disappear?
Zach's good.
So yeah, I think somehow with our lunch break, everybody's windows got moved around. So you're in totally different Brady Bunch boxes that I'm trying to relearn where everybody is because my order of people is totally different. So Zach is now on a totally opposite side of the screen than he was this morning. So so yeah, it looks like we've got everybody. Okay, so we've got this DRWI LTE sketch. This is a default sketch that we've written that even says here, move this over. This sketch is an example of the logging data to an SD card and sending data to the data portal, which is the Monitor My Watershed, for people to be used if you're part of the William Penn Foundation's DRWI initiative, right? So that's the one that we're using. Other people could use a slight variety of this, but this one is configured just right for what we need to do today. Now remember earlier I had asked you to turn on the line numbers in Arduino so that I can refer to different lines of code because we're going to need to scroll down in your sketch to where you find line number 43. And this is where you need to give yourself a logger ID. Right now it's just listed as XXX. There's 5 X's there. That's just a placeholder because we got to give it a name. So we just put some X's in there. If you program your board right now, it's just going to put X's on your data file and in various places. So we don't really want to do that. So this is where you can give it a logger ID, like whatever your site name was. Like yesterday, if you go to my thing, I called this one WKSC12B. Whatever, this is like the short code. This isn't the long description like so-and-so creek at Bob's farm or something like that. You want to use the short, 6 or 8 or probably no more than 10 letters just to kind of give it a code. So since I called mine that, I'm going to just call WKSC12B. So that's just what I'm calling it so that my data logger matches my website. Because it may not seem like a big deal now, but months or years from now, when you're looking at data cards and websites and you're trying to match things up, you don't want to have the website using different names and codes than your data cards because it's just going to be a big headache for matching things up later down the road. In here, that's the only thing we need to change is on line 43 is to give your logger ID and make sure that you just erase the X's and that your logger ID is still surrounded by quotation marks and there's still a semicolon at the end of your line. If you've deleted one of those quotation marks or the semicolon, then it's not going to work and this whole thing will break when we go to program your board. So make sure it looks just like what's on my screen, except that the blue text inside the quotation marks is unique to your station.
And to be clear, Shannon, that should be the same identifier that they used yesterday for the site code, correct?
Correct. It doesn't have to be. It will work if it's not right. It's just going to cause you a lot of problems later if your data card doesn't match up with your website. So it's best if this matches whatever it was that you gave your site for your site code yesterday when we registered. Everybody else can work ahead with me on this now. Click on View Token UUID List on Monitor My Watershed.
Okay, I'm going in now.
Got it?
Okay.
These are just people that have the boards that are doing this, right?
No, you can send data to Monitor My Watershed with a $5,000 commercial data logger. You can.
So I should log in this myself as well?
No.
Okay.
I'm just saying in general, like anybody can use this, but right now you don't need to do this step because you don't have a Mayfly and you're not going to be sending data. So if you don't have a Mayfly on your desk, you don't have to go through this little part.
That's what I was asking. Okay.
We're going to walk through it and get most of the way there. But right after we copy and paste this, we're going to hit the upload button to put the code on the logger. And if you don't have a logger, then there's no point. But it's good to know how to do this because if you do come up with a Mayfly later, you're going to need to follow these steps in order to program it. So everybody who's on Monitor My Watershed, remember you got to be on your own station name, not mine here in the Schuylkill River. But I'm transmitting all these top secret codes here that I don't want the rest of the world to know. But this is going to my temporary station. So your codes are all going to be different. They're not going to be the same gigantic long numbers as this, but you're going to have the same parameters such as conductivity and depth, temperature, and battery voltage and percent. So you'll still have all of those. You're just going to have these gigantic numbers beforehand are going to be slightly different. And then at the bottom, there's also registration token and sampling feature. And these are tied to the actual device and the sampling feature UUID. So all of these things are different for each station, which is why I can't program a station for you because you're the one who has access to all these codes. So this is why you've got to do this part yourself. So once you've got all of these tokens and everything displayed on this window, there's this very handy button here that says copy. And if you push that button, you'll get a little pop-up at the bottom of your screen that says copy to clipboard, right? And if you've ever done anything with Windows or even a Mac, when you copy stuff to your clipboard, it's like a temporary memory that your computer is going to remember that little chunk of code, and that's what we need to do. So we've now copied this code into the temporary clipboard of the computer, and then we're going to go back to our DRWI LTE sketch, and we need to scroll down, and we got to go a long ways down here till we get to, I'm going nice and slow, line number 175. And the line 174, actually, you see a bunch of caution comments there. It says, be very certain that all this stuff matches and rearrange some variables and caution, caution, caution. And so it's warning you, if you don't do this part right, then you're going to be transmitting the wrong data and everything's going to kind of get all hiccup. So this is, I'm going to maximize my window just a little bit. This is probably the hardest part about what we're going to do right now. We need to highlight by using your mouse to click and highlight everything between lines 175 and 187. We don't want to have anything ahead of that or anything below that highlighted, just yellow highlights on 175 to 187. All right. Once everybody has done that, then use one finger to reach up and hit the backspace or the delete button, whichever one is easiest for you, on your keyboard. When you do that, you have now erased, just hit the backspace button once, you have now erased all of that yellow highlighted text. Your cursor should still be there at 175. And now we're going to paste in the code that we copied earlier. It's still in the temporary memory of the laptop. So that's where we want to do Control V. And it will paste in the stuff we copied from our website. If you're on a Mac, I don't know, it's whatever the Mac shortcut button is. Paul can tell us, is it Control V or is it the squiggly button V? Yeah. So once you've pasted that, you have now, if you remember earlier, I'm going to undo what I just did. Earlier, the UUIDs had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then A, B, C, D. They look very generic. When you put in the correct ones, you're going to end up with all these mismatch numbers and letters and descriptions of stuff. So we want to make sure that now lines 175 through 185 have all of that complicated looking code from your Monitor My Watershed station page and not mine. Is everybody getting that? Is anybody not getting that? All right. So the only problem here is we've probably got some stuff in the wrong order because our sample sketch that we included was probably set up for talking about turbidity. And there's probably 2 lines of turbidity data in here and a few other things that we need to do. So we're going to scroll down just a little bit. And you can also notice the order of our top 3 is conductivity, depth, and temperature. So C, D, and T. It's a slightly different order than what we normally talk about when we talk about CTDs. So we got C, and then D, and then T. So if we scroll down here, I'm sorry, scroll up just a little, lines 160 through 168 tell our code what order the parameters are going to be in. So it's expecting conductivity first, which is correct, but now it's expecting temperature for the second one. The website is set up with depth as a second and temperature third. So this is a little bit of a hiccup, and this is the kind of thing that gets really complicated if you don't do it right. But we've now got to remove the depth, which is on the 3rd line on 162. We've got to cut that out and put it in place of 161. And make them switch places. So the easiest way to do that is to just highlight that, and you can hit Control X because that'll cut it out. It's kind of like copying, but it actually cuts it while copying at the same time. And then you can go back up a line, use your enter key to move it down, and then kind of paste it in. I'm going to move it over just so it looks nice and neat. So Control X to cut it out, and then Control V to paste it back in 1 line higher, so that our order is now conductivity, depth, and then temperature. Is everybody getting that? All right, Michelle's good, Paul's good. All right, Levi's good. Okay, so we got that in the right order. Now, if you look, the 5th and 6th item, or sorry, 4th and 5th item on the list are Campbell OBS3 turbidity. You guys don't have turbidity sensors, so we need to tell the data logger, don't worry about turbidity measurements right now. So in order to do that, you may notice like down on line 170 and 71 and 72, there's 2 slashes, and then there's a bunch of like stuff that doesn't look like computer code because it looks like just regular comments saying, check this, do that, be careful, whatever. If you put 2 slashes on an Arduino line, then you can write whatever you want after it and the program will ignore it. So in this case, we want it to ignore the Campbell turbidity configuration lines. So we're going to put 2 slashes at the beginning of line 163 and 164. And you'll notice that the text turns kind of gray instead of black. So now we've got gray lines for the 2 Campbell turbidity lines. Yep, Paul's good. Levi's good.
Shannon,
Yep.
I have a question. So on Monitor My Watershed, if people added the specific variable in a different order,
Yep.
that shows up differently, right?
Yeah, so what the order that we're making this list right now up here needs to match the order that's on the website. And the order on the website matches this stuff right here. If we created the website differently than this chunk of all the weird, wacky, long codes that we downloaded earlier, that would be in a different order. So what you need to do is make sure that line 160 to 168 match the order in 170 to 182, which is the same order that's on the website. So yeah, the reason for that is if you do this in a different order, if we put like battery voltage very top of the list, the website is going to take your 4.2 battery voltage and think that that's conductivity. So the order in which these things are tell the website what order the number coming through is. So it makes it, your data will be all wrong if you get this order wrong. So it's not the end of the world, it's just that you're gonna start getting temperature data for depth and battery voltage for signal percent, and so all of your variables will be kind of messed up. So
Right, so if yours doesn't match Shannon's, that's okay, just make sure that it's matching, you know, the correct variable from your site.
if everybody went through the order of creating the parameters yesterday, remember we went through the list where I just did it in order, where we did the first one, which was connectivity, and then we did it in the order in which the website was prompting us. If we had done it slightly differently, then we wouldn't have to do this step. So it depends on just how you created your website. So hopefully if you created your site exactly like I did, this is the order that you would do. So just make sure that this part, lines 160 to 168, match 177 to 182 or thereabouts. So we grayed out the two turbidity lines. The next, remember down here we had temperature after, then we had the battery voltage for the mayfly and the battery temperature. So those are the next two, 165, 166, those are good. And then we're not transmitting RSSI because that's that complicated number that people really don't need to know about. So 167 on my code there is the modem RSSI. I'm gonna comment that out again with 2 forward slashes there. And so now in our code, in our variable list, which is 159 to 168, we've grayed out the 2 Campbell lines and we've grayed out, the RSSI line. So that leaves us with the 3 CTD sensors values, the mayfly battery, the mayfly temperature, and the mayfly cell phone signal. Everybody got that? All right, so one other thing, super quick to mention, if you scroll up just a little bit, you don't have to, you can just look at my screen. Our turbidity sensors have calibration information included with them. I'm not sure what the new ones are gonna be. If they need to be calibrated when you get them, you might have to do this step later. When you go back to program your board for turbidity, you'll have to enter in some calibration information. We're just gonna leave these all as zeros because we have no sensor there. But that's just something to keep in mind for later. So nothing else needs to be done on this. If you go back up, you can just, again, you don't have to do it on yours. You can just look on mine if you want. But up here, I've got the logging interval set to 5. If for some reason you really wanted to record data every 10 minutes or 30 minutes, you could choose that. But like I said earlier, most of the streams and rivers and things that we want to measure, a 5-minute interval is the appropriate interval for measuring. Sometimes I'll do 2 minutes or even 1 minute. 1 minute gets a little bit hard because by the time it's taken the readings and then gone online and transmitted the data, it's time to take another reading, so your board never sleeps. It's just always on. So you really don't want to do 1 minute, but 2 if you really, really have like something that you're trying to measure super fast, but it's going to eat up your battery way too much. 5 minutes is a great interval to use with this hardware. And we've put in our time zone as being Eastern Standard Time right here. If you were in California or somewhere else in the world, you could change your time zone and it will keep track of that so that it displays your data in your local time zone when you go to look at it. And there's all sorts of stuff I could go into in this sketch. It's almost 400 lines long, but because we've already written all of this, the only thing that we needed to do for you to customize it was to put in your logger ID here on line 43, and then to copy and paste that chunk of code from your Monitor My Watershed sensor site, and then check that the order was correct. So if everybody's got that part, we're ready to upload the code to the mayfly and see what happens. Is everybody doing okay with that? like everybody's good. I don't see too many other comments or worried expressions. Okay, so I guess we're ready to program. You can go ahead and open your serial monitor first to make sure your board is still awake and that you're still hearing something. You're probably going to get this whatever code you were using last before we turned it off. In my case, it's looking for a CTD and I disconnected, so it's not seeing it. I plug it back in. Okay, now it's seeing my CTD on channel 1. So everybody should be still probably getting that. This just verifies that your COM port is correct and nothing has gone to sleep and everything's plugged in right. Everybody doing all right with their COM port and community loggers talking to the computer again? Because now all we need to do is hit the upload button on your DRWI LTE sketch. We don't need to plug in the cell phone board or do anything else. We're still missing one plug-in wire and a battery. We don't need that just yet. We're going to wait on that. We're just going to upload the sketch first and see what happens, okay? So I'm hitting the upload button. Remember, on mine, this is going to take 5 minutes or so, so we probably will jump ahead and talk about something else while mine is uploading. I also don't have an active SIM card, so we're not going to see data showing up online, but we'll be able to look at the website and see if you guys have success. So if you guys can give me a thumbs up once you have uploaded the DRWI LTE sketch, and you should see a big description window pop up. It'll say something about that you're running a sketch and that it's talking to 8 sensors and it'll say something about going online to synchronize the clock. You should get a whole bunch of text scrolling up on your serial monitor after it's done uploading. So if you guys can let me know when that starts to happen, then we'll talk about that. In the meantime, I'm going to go back over here to the map and get ready for, as soon as you verify, it looks like I'm getting a thumbs up from Paul that he's getting a bunch of texty stuff. And so now, as you probably, it says on the screen that your, let's see if mine's still compiling. It'll say going online, trying to synchronize clock or something like that. If you didn't plug in a memory card earlier, you might also get a warning that there was no memory card. We try to make this user friendly so that you don't forget to plug a memory card in if you've gotten, so sometimes it's easy to forget to put a card in. Remember I said earlier, it tries to go online and synchronize a clock if every time that you boot up the Mayfly for the first time. But because you don't have a cell plan, it's going to spend about 2 minutes looking for a cell plan and trying to synchronize a clock. So it's just going to look like it froze when it says synchronizing, so that's okay.
Rob's giving a thumbs up. He's good. Rob Tuttle.
Yep, it'll say setting up sensors. So there's a lot of like configuration-y type stuff that it does when you first turn it on.
Looks like Zach is good.
Awesome.
Tiffany, Bob.
Tiffany's getting an error that says it's missing a terminating character.
And she probably deleted a semicolon at the end of one of the lines. All lines in Arduino need to have a semicolon at the end of it. And we only should have changed 40. And when in doubt, if you think you've messed up your code a lot, just close DRWI LTE, don't save any changes, and just reopen it again and go back in and change your logger ID on line 43, but only change the X's inside the quotation marks. And then
check for quotes on line 43.
On 43, where?
Make sure there's a quotes on either side of the ID.
Yeah, the logger ID is the logger ID equals quote, and then some sort of character string, a quote, and then a semicolon, which is the dot and a comma looking thing. I'm guessing that it probably doesn't have a semicolon at the end. A lot of people think that's just like an extra squiggly thing, and it's easily deleted in a lot of our workshops, but all lines in Arduino need to end in that. Well,
yeah, I think that's what it was. She said she got it now. Thank you, Shannon.
Yep. All right. So
There's a few other things in the chat box.
What was that, Dave?
There's a few other things in the chat box if you want to just check it to just before we move on.
Levi says uploading, but you're not getting any text in the window.
Was it a separate window or just like in that black box immediately below the upload bar?
It'll be your serial terminal, the glass that opens up your COM5 or COM3 window. That's where you'll see the communication from the Mayfly.
Okay, it's good then. So setting up sensors.
Awesome. All right, so your data loggers apparently are all working fine. They're trying to record stuff and they're trying to transmit stuff, but they have no way of transmitting because the cellular module needs a lot of power, and it can't get that power just from your USB jack. So we've got to plug in this gigantic battery pack, which yours, if you didn't already take it out, yours is going to be inside a cardboard box with a flammable sticker on the outside because this is a flammable, blow-upable lithium battery. You don't want to stab this, drop it, look at it funny, speak meanly at it. It's very fragile. I've never had one blow up on purpose, but I have gone out and stabbed them with a fence post or a hammer just to see what happens, and it's not good. So we want to treat this thing gently. But when you take it out of the box, you'll have a big blue battery pack. They come in different sizes. This is kind of a medium size. They get them even really smaller, and there's even really big jumbo size. But for most of what you guys are doing, this is a 4,400 milliamp hour, which is 4.5 amps about, and it's got plenty of power to keep everything alive for a long time. So it's got that polarized connector on the end that only goes in one way.
Shannon, do you want to stop share screen so people can see that up close, or do you need to keep this?
We need to do it. So it's the tiny polarized connector. And before we plug the battery in, though, we need to plug in this battery jumper. This is the short red and black cable that came in your. I guess I just put them probably loosely in the kit. I hope I put one of these in everybody's kit. Did everybody get one of these? Okay, good. I couldn't remember now that I was thinking about it. I remember putting everything else in your kits, and I drawing a blank about this. It was like 10 o'clock at night when I packaged your kits the other day, trying to get them out in a hurry. So I'm glad you all got them. So the way this goes is one end plugs in to, there's one of those little white polarized jacks right next to the cellular B, which is the thing in the very middle of your data logger. That's the green, like intermediate board between the Mayfly and the cellular module. So if you plug that one end into there, it doesn't matter, the cable is the same on both sides. You're probably going to get some lights and stuff. I had a light there for just a second. So you've got one plugged into jack M, kind of next to the where it says LiPo, either one of those, and then the other end goes to the white jack on your B adapter. So hopefully everybody's got that. At some point, you're probably going to see a whole bunch of blinky lights. You might not. The problem is that cell board is trying to draw lots of power from your USB jack. So we need to kind of supplement that with the big giant blue battery pack. So this is where we plug this into the other jack labeled M. We don't use the jack at the very tip of the Mayfly. That's the one that has solar written next to it. We don't want to do that. If you look at your diagram that we sent you earlier, there's two jacks labeled M as in Mike, and they both say LiPo, L-I-P-O, right next to it. And the LiPo, and it can go on either one. They're exactly the same. They're connected to the exact same points in the board. But as long as the battery is going to one of the LiPo jacks and the little jumpery cable is going to the other LiPo jack that goes to the cell adapter B port. All right. So this is kind of important to know because later on, if you ever go out to the field and you remove the battery, or especially if you're changing things out, you're going to have to reconnect some of these power things. And if you plug the battery into the solar jack at the end, then it could potentially damage some stuff. So we want to make sure to never plug the battery into the solar jack. And it gets confusing because they're all red and black wires with white connectors, and it's very hard to tell the difference. You just have to be super cautious at this point. So if you've done this, you now have a blue light and a white light. And some of you who have an active SIM card and a good cell connection might, at some point, get an orange light on the cell B. When I'm talking about lights, I'm talking about the ones on the cellular adapter board, the little green, tinier board. There's 3 lights there that tell you what's going on with your cell transmission. There's an orange one that says what your signal strength is, a blue one that tells you if you're on the network, and a white one that tells you if the radio is on at all. In my case, these two, the white and the blue light, are on. It's hard to tell the difference on my screen, but one's white and one's blue. They're both on because it's not finding an active cell plan, because I don't have a good SIM card in here. If your card is active, and again, it takes a little bit of time sometimes after you've activated a card for the orange light to come on at first. If you don't have a good AT&T signal at your house, like if you happen to have AT&T on your cell phone, and you don't have a signal with your phone, you're not going to get a signal with this. So orange next, yeah, there's an orange light next to, it's actually not orange, there's a yellow light on the actual mayfly. That's the charging light. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. There's that's kind of a yellowy color. There's an actual orange, like carrot orange light that will be on your the B adapter, and it only stays on for a little bit. If it times out, everything goes to sleep. And in my case, the only thing that's on is the yellow charging light, and it says, what if I don't have an orange light? It depends on which orange light. If you're talking about it's the one that says RSSI on the cell phone B. That's your received signal strength indicator. If that's not on, then it means either you don't have a cell signal, or your antenna's not on right, or in this case, probably just no cell signal, or you haven't given it enough time. If all of your lights have gone off on your mayfly and the switch is on, you can look at what's on your serial monitor, and it probably says something like gone to sleep or something like that. And so remember, the board goes to sleep for 5-minute intervals. It's now 2:24. You synchronized your clock earlier to come on every 5 minutes. So don't turn off your board just yet. Wait until, let's see, I got 2:24 and 39 seconds. So in 20 seconds, your lights should come on and your B should start transmitting, and you should see if something's going on. I have a red light near the analog pin head. All right, there is another red light at the very end of your board next to the white connectors on the end. That means that it's powering your CTD sensor. Somebody's got a SD card failed to initialize. So that means that your card is not reading your memory card. So did you put a SD card in the vertical card socket? Did you make sure that your vertical card socket is in exactly all 4 of those? There's 4x2, there's 4 pins. If you got it too far over, it's very easy to install that to the right or to the left and not have the pins in the exact right. There's 8 pins that need to go right in the 8 jack socket things. The other thing could be, we've made something like 3,000 of those little micro SD card adapters. About 1 out of every couple hundred will actually be a bad SD card adapter. So if you still can't get it to work, you can try removing it.
Sorry, it was actually forward 1 row of 4. So I put it back in again. Will it try to write on its own, or do I need to do something to initialize this?
I would hit the reset button and make sure that everything is functioning properly. If you had it up a row, you could have potentially shorted something out.
Got it.
Something either on the mayfly or on the adapter, or blew up the memory card itself. So hopefully everything's working okay.
All right.
All right. If you have a red light, you should move the SIM card. No, don't do anything. If the logger will still work, it will still save data on the memory card. It's just not transmitting it. So the reason we do 2 different ways of storing data, there are times where the cell network goes off, or somebody forgets to pay their cell phone bill or something like that. And the data is always saved every 5 minutes on the memory card. The memory card is the black card. It's not the SIM card. There's a SIM card on your logger, and there's a memory card. They're two separate things. No data is stored on the SIM card. The data is always on the black, removable, tiny SanDisk 8 GB memory card. So even if you're in an area with no cell phone coverage, then you can still record data on your memory card. You might want to just remove the cell B altogether if you know that you're never going to have coverage there, and this is an area that's never going to have a cell signal. Then you're spending about 2 minutes every 5 minutes searching for a cell network, and that will kind of wear your battery down. So in cases like that, we recommend people would just remove the cell B and then save it for if they move that station, or put it a new station in an area where they do have coverage. So one of the things we tell people is, like, if you're not sure if you want to activate a plan or even do it, is just drive around, find somebody with an AT&T. You can also use Verizon, but we've had issues with the Verizon network, so it works more reliably on AT&T. But if you drive around and you find someone who's got a cell phone with AT&T and you've got an LTE signal, then these will work in that area.
We have a, we have a right along the Bashikillis AT&T tower that was upgraded. We do have problems every once in a while.
I actually built a this little device. If I turn it on, it has a 4GB in it, and there's a little screen that just says LTE battery checker. It tells me my battery voltage and whether my signal. I got 0% here because I don't have an active SIM card in this board. So this is just takes the place of me. I've got a Verizon cell phone, so I can use this to drive around and tell if I have an AT&T signal or not. So instead of having a CTD on there, I just have a little screen that tells me that. Somebody has a yellow and green light on the Mayfly board, no lights on the cell board yet. If you've had no lights on, because we've now gone through at least one cycle, and one more minute, we're gonna get 2:30. If you might also want to restart your board if you didn't already restart it once we've plugged all that in, because sometimes the board doesn't get configured properly if you don't hit reset after we've connected all the battery stuff in there together. So the yellow light that's on your Mayfly is the charge indicator. The battery, that as you got it, is about half charged. That's the way you want to store a brand new battery. So for the next couple of hours, this yellow light will be on. If I have this connected out in the field and the sun was shining and my battery needed to be charged, you would see a yellow light on the Mayfly. However, if it's a super bright sunny day, your battery will be charged. So when you drive out there and you open the box, you will not see that yellow charge light because the battery is fully charged. We're only seeing the charge light because we're connected to a USB jack and the computer is charging that battery because it's not full. So sometimes you'll see that yellow charge light and sometimes you won't. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means your battery is charged or not. Then the red light that's down in the far corner next to the jack at the end, that's the sensor light, and if the sensor is being powered, that light will be on. The data logger only turns on the CTD sensor for about 10 seconds. It takes a reading, and then it turns off the sensor power while the radio stays on and does its transmitting for another minute or so. So we don't want to always power our sensors because that's one of the most battery hungry things on the device, because it uses all the power just to take the reading from the sensor. So you'll see various lights come on at different times based on which type of sensors you've got, how long. Some of our sensors take 15 to 20 seconds to take a reading, so the light will be on even longer, but in your case, it should only be on for maybe 10 or 15 at the most. And then when the cell phone comes on, you'll see a blue light, a white light, hopefully then an orange light. Then the blue light should start blinking to let you know that you've joined the network. Did anybody get a blinking blue light yet? Michelle's got one and Paul's got one. Oh, and Rob got it. So if your blue light was blinking and your orange was on, sometimes the orange doesn't always come on, but if the blue blinks, that means you successfully joined a cell network. And then if you go to, I'm going to share my screen back to this window. We're all going to go here to, you can just watch on my screen. I'm going to reload Monitor My Watershed, and we're going to look and see since I don't know exactly which stations are which. My website's still loading. I'm going to look in Paul's area and I'll look up in Michelle's area and see if one of your gray dots has now become green.
Yeah, and Shannon, I'm having trouble loading the website too, so I'm hoping that it's not that issue that was going on this morning. But I'm having the exact same
they're
problem.
having the server issues that are up there, and they restarted, and there's some delays. Sometimes it's just with the website interface. Oh, I see one of Paul's stations turned green. So guessing from this, it's PK. No, it's this Cherry Creek Kemertown Road site. There it calls nodding yes. So that's the site. And if I was to click on that, I would actually probably see the, oh, we'll go ahead and click on it and see, probably gonna, there we go. So his water depth is -1 millimeter. So what does that mean? Well, his CTD sensor is sitting on his desk, and just the air pressure alone, and the sensor's got a couple of millimeters where sometimes it'll be positive a millimeter or two or negative a little. That's not a problem. If you put this sensor in 10 millimeters of water, well, that's only like 100 millimeters of water, stick it in a glass of drinking water, you'd see that number go up to a certain, like, 10, 20 millimeters, 30 millimeters, whatever it needs to be. So that number looks great. The temperature in his office there is 23.8. His battery is at 4.8 because it's being charged by our 5-volt computer, so that's good. His mayfly is a little bit warmer because it's 30 degrees, and it's probably just warm because he's got all this electronics hooked up next to it. And then battery or cell phone signal is 90%. So we can tell here Paul's got a really good AT&T signal at his location. If this number was like 10 or 20 or something, 25, 30, if it was a really low number, then we might be on the lookout for data that might disappear for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. Like it might go in and out because you know how cell phones can be a little flaky if you're right on the edge of only 1 bar or 2 bars or something. So it looks like, and it says connectivity is 0. It's got like a little dash there. That's what it does when there's a 0. The reason there's no connectivity is because his sensor is sitting in air and there's no connectivity between those little screws. If he sticks that in a glass of water, then we would see whatever the conductivity of his water is there. So we can look at that and tell that Paul's site is working great. His sensor's online. I'm going to go see if, I don't know, we don't know which one Michelle was testing. It probably is, I guess, not one of these maybe.
It's still gray.
Okay. So we might have to troubleshoot that and to figure that out.
I don't think I have good cell coverage. Maybe the yellow or orange, whatever light isn't on. Would that have something to do with it?
It's possible, yeah. So one of the things that you can do if you grab the data card out of your logger and put it in your computer, not right now, but give it like a little bit of time. If it never shows up online, all of these parameters that we just saw on any of these websites, like over here on Paul's site, all of these parameters for conductivity and temperature and voltage and cell phone signal strength will be in a text file that you can view on your computer. So I don't know that I have one handy. I don't have one on this machine, or I'd show you. But if you look at the text file, it'll have all these numbers in. You can open it up in Excel, and it will have a column for cell phone signal strength. And you can look at that and say, oh, well, if it says 0, then you're not getting any signal at all. If it says 5 or 10, then you'll know. So it's handy for troubleshooting your data, even if you don't have a cell phone coverage there.
I'm sorry, Shan, how did you say you can find that?
So take your text file, like the memory card, yank after we're done, because we got to move on to the next section. So after we're done, we can work with you on this. But for anybody else, remove the big black memory card from your Mayfly. You've got 2 cards, so you can pull out one and put the other one in. And take the one that's got stored data every 5 minutes on it, put it in the adapter, and then you should be able, if your computer doesn't have a slot for putting this adapter in, then you can buy one of those USB adapters to plug in a memory card. But you'll put the card in your laptop and open that up with Excel. You'll get a CSV file on the card, and you open it with Excel, and you'll have columns of data. You'll have depth and 1 column for temperature, and you'll have 1 column for cell phone signal strength. And that data file will tell you way more than you can guess by looking at blinky lights or anything else. And if you're having trouble, what you can do is email us that data file and say, hey, this is what my card looks like. What does this mean? And we can try to help you kind of decipher that. And Zach's asking, you don't want to yank out the card while the logger's on, like while it's actively recording, because you could, like, it's like taking a picture and then yanking the card out in the middle of taking a picture. If you do it in between readings, it's okay. But the safest thing is to actually turn your mayfly off, switch the cards, and then turn the mayfly back on. But that's what we recommend people do. So either way, either pull it out when the lights aren't all on and it's taking a reading, or turn it off and then restart it once you put the new card in. But that's the reason we gave you 2 cards, just so that you can always have one in the logger and one in your computer or in your car as you're driving around. So I know looks like we're probably not all to the point of having live online data and success with cell phone stuff due to a variety of issues, but since we've only got 23 minutes left, I wanted to touch briefly on taking this whole device monstrosity that we just put together and transferring it to your Pelican case. I've already gone through and installed a lot of the time-consuming parts on your case because they require a lot of fun parts and tools that not everybody has. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can show you a few of those things. So I use a really large crescent wrench and a 27 millimeter, I think it's 1 1/16 or 1 1/8 socket, and then a big gigantic 10-inch socket wrench, because you've got to get down inside the inside of the case to tighten the back side of these plastic nuts. And if you don't have the right size socket, it's not going to work right. So I went ahead and tightened or installed the black cable glands on the bottom of all your cases. Now you just saw this box. These things, the hinges on here will pinch. If your fingers are on the back side of this box while it closes, it hurts a lot. And I have lots of little blood blisters on my fingers from installing all of these boxes. So if you're not careful when we're working with this today and the box lid slams, it either slams on your finger here or you pinch your finger back on the hinge end, be very, very careful because it hurts a lot. And because it's a very tight seal, we don't want water to get in here, but it also will pinch your finger. So be careful with that. So I've already installed those connectors to make your life a little bit easier. But what I did not do was rip out all the foam all the way, because these boxes come with a big, gigantic, solid piece of foam. If you've already got your Pelican case handy, you can do this step with me. I've kind of perforated your foam a little bit to make this work, but I take an X-Acto blade and cut out these different shapes of what we need. So if what we're going to need to do is reach in, like stick your finger up in the corner of the Pelican case and pull out the block of foam. And you'll also see there's a small sheet that kind of protects the back of all this. On yours, you've got the screws and the bracket that's on the back. All of these parts are in the parts list that we have in our manual, so if you really want to buy all these yourself, you can. But we use a special mending plate. I drilled holes in the back so that you can install screws with waterproof neoprene gaskets and washers and lock nuts on the back. And in order to tighten those up, you need like a 7/16 inch socket or a nut driver, and then a Phillips head screwdriver, which we did include in your kit if you need to use that, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. So anyway, I've already installed all of your bracket stuff on the back, so you've got that piece of foam covering those two, the nut and the little bolt thing that's sticking through there. So now what you've got is this big block of foam. You'll notice the end of it's kind of already cut off. I've kept some of that. And we need to go through and then rip out very carefully. If you rip too hard, you're going to end up breaking this thing in a lot of different places. They've kind of pre-perforated this stuff in little 1 centimeter cubes, which makes it really nice so that you're not just cutting crooked lines everywhere. And I've gone through and I've already cut about halfway through this block at all the right locations. So I would start off with the very top of, not the end that's got the cutout here on this on there, but up on the very top. There's a hole. This is where we like to put our battery. So you can take your fingers and just kind of It works best if you kind of put this on a flat surface, like your table. I'm doing this up in the air, but if you just kind of wiggle your fingers, you'll hear it ripping, and you kind of poke until your fingers pop out the back. You don't want to be using a sharp knife or anything to do this part because you'll end up just cutting in the wrong direction. You can do all of this. It's called pick and pluck foam because you can pluck it out with just your fingers. So if you just poke around, you'll end up breaking out a little rectangle on the top of the box, okay? Now what's really handy is a block that's 4 by 2 of these little foam blocks is the exact right size for holding the lithium battery that we use. All right, so has everybody ripped out their battery holder at the top? Now the next part we need to do is to rip out the part that's going to hold the mayfly box. So again, just kind of take your fingers and rip through. This is a big gigantic rectangle that holds this little tan box that your mayfly came in. We don't need the lid. If you guys have a solid lid, this is a clear one. We only need just the back half of the box. But this is the hard part where you've got to reach in and just kind of dig around until your fingers pop out the back and you hear lots of ripping and tearing. You want to make sure you don't rip the part that goes up towards the battery hole that we just made, because when it's only one layer thick, it's really easy to accidentally rip an adjacent thing. So I kind of tried to cut it most of the way so that you guys can get the feel for how this works. If you've got an X-Acto blade and you are doing this with a brand new box, you just got to kind of count the number of foam squares and cut it exactly right. All right, so there we go. So we've now removed the perforations and we now have a gigantic hole in the middle of our pretty foam. And if you remember, I did. I gave everybody a small chunk of foam in their big white box of their kits. We always try to recycle as much stuff as possible. So of all the hundreds of mayflies that I've assembled with their pelican foam, I rip these things into small little chunks and use those for padding inside of our boxes to keep things from shifting around when we ship things to Amazon or other places. So we've never had to throw out any of the gigantic hundreds of pieces of this foam because we're able to reuse it. But it's really good foam. You can use it for lots of other arts and crafts. My kids like to tear it up and do things with it too. So then the last little chunk we need is we got to make a hole in the bottom of the box for our cables to enter. So I've cut out a little piece that's 6 by 4 down here in the bottom where the perforations are. And again, you got to be real careful that you don't accidentally rip out this piece at the bottom that's already been trimmed a little bit, because the hardest part for that was trimming this out, and I'll show you why we do that. So that's that portion. Let's see, was there any other? I think there's not any other questions on the chat. Everybody looks like you're doing good. So you've now got this piece of foam with all the holes in it. And then on your mayfly box, you've got all right, so I've got to install my cable glands. I left these out earlier because I want to explain what these are. So these are called cable glands or waterproof cord grip, and they're really handy for getting some sort of cable into a waterproof box without it leaking. You can see here's one that's got 4 small holes in it. Here's one that's got 6 tiny holes in it. So depending on what type of cable and how many you need to get into your box, you can use all different types of cable glands. So in our case, we're using ones that hold, it's a little bit greater than 1/4 of an inch because of the diameter of our cables. Actually, I think these go up to 0.47 or something like that, but they shrink down to less than 1/4 of an inch, which is the diameter of this red cable. All right, so now we've got to install the red solar panel cable before we do anything else. Well, we've still got the foam outside of the box. you've got to install your solar panel cable. And this is the thing that gets connected to the solar panel on the top and gets routed to the inside of your Pelican case. So this is the part where you need to make sure that the box doesn't close on your fingers. And in your box of parts, you've got that 18-inch red cable with a barrel jack on one end, and then it's got this 2-pin red and black. You'll recognize this as the same sort of connector that was on our battery pack. This is what goes into that solar jack. And this goes into the tiny jack, the tiny cable gland. There's 2 large ones and 1 small one. This is going to go in the small cable gland. The hard part is that this little white thing is just tiny bit bigger than the gray plug that's in the back of this. So you've got to gently poke it in there. You might have to like unscrew the, make the cable gland a tiny bit bigger. I think I've got the wrong size cable gland on here. All right. I have like 20 different sizes of cable glands here, so they're all different dimensions. And if you've got some small, like a pencil or some item, you might need that to poke the little white connector, but you're going from the outside of the box to the inside. Use a pen here to help kind of poke it in. These wires are not really that firm, so you can't poke it all the way by itself. I think I'm using the wrong cable gland because it's just not wanting to go. All right, so now I've got my red solar panel cable going inside the gray rubber gasket, and then we feed it up so it's starting to come out, and then we kind of tighten the cable gland just a little bit. Okay, has everybody got that? So now we're able to put our foam in because we don't need to get in there for anything else. So you kind of put the foam in and then have that solar panel cable poking out through the gigantic middle square in the foam. So it looks kind of like that. Right. Then you take just the gray plastic box that we shipped your mayfly in. I built the mayfly specifically to fit in this box. I found a nice size box that fit in a nice size Pelican. And then I said, okay, well now I know what the dimensions of my mayfly are because I want to use this box. So that's the reason everything fits in here so nicely. It was designed like this. So if your solar panel cable isn't long enough to hang down kind of like that, then you need to push a little bit more in from the bottom and pull a little bit more from the top. This is another one of those things that if some animal or a person yanks on this too hard, they can actually pull some of this back out of the box. So making sure you've got enough. You don't want a whole lot in here because then you've got too much cable in here and it's kind of in your way. So just enough to kind of come in because we're going to plug it in the upper corner up here in just a moment. All right, so if you've got that going, now you can turn off your mayfly because we've got to disconnect all the sensors and everything. I would unplug the headphone jack from the CTD sensor. We just unplug the headphone jack. So now you're left with your mayfly. I've taken my battery off. I'll put the battery back on. It's okay if you want to have your battery still connected, that's fine. All right, so we've got a mayfly with a battery and a cell antenna and a Grove cable. I've got a whole big mess of stuff. We're going to take that and just stick this in the Pelican case. The battery goes nicely in that square that we made earlier. And you'll see the mayfly fits down inside the box, nice and neat. You can take your solar panel cable and plug it into the solar jack. If your fingers are long and skinny enough, you can push it down in there where it is. It might also help if you want to have the mayfly owl on top of the foam and then connect the solar. That's a little bit easier for you. And then once you've got this, all three, you've got solar panel and the 2 battery lines, then you can kind of drop it all down in there. So you can kind of see the solar line just kind of comes up from behind the case, drops in, and goes up to that upper corner. And right now our antenna is just kind of dangling around. We haven't really secured it yet, but we need to. They actually include an adhesive on the back of the panel or back of the antenna. If you want to glue it into something, we don't really want to do that. So what we're going to do is just tuck it out of the way. There's this couple of spots of shiny metal on your antenna. You don't want to touch that against anything inside the mayfly that's metal, or it'll short it out. So you do not want to just like lay your antenna in here or just have it flopping in the breeze, because when you close the door, it could potentially get stuck in the hinge, and we don't want to do that. So the best place to tuck your antenna is just to kind of loop the black wire back up and then tuck the antenna. It's kind of hard to see it here. It just goes in the space between the foam and the outside of the pelican case, right? Just kind of, and you just take your finger. There's a little ridge in there, so it's kind of hard. It'll get hung up on there. But just take your finger and push the antenna. So now your antenna is long ways on the, just inside this big gigantic outside. So it's hard to see. If I pull it out a little, you can see it kind of hiding in there. So it's just hiding between the foam and the outer pelican case on the edge right next to the hinge. And then so the antenna just kind of loops up and around. If your antenna wire is pointed down, you can gently spin it around so that it's facing up. I like to have it facing up because then it's not in the way of the on-off switch. If you've got the antenna cable going down, then you have a potential to bump into that antenna cable when you're reaching in to turn it on or off or to grab the memory card. All right, so we've got that. And there's 2 other things we got to do. Number 1, we got to put the CTD sensor in here. So you can take your CTD sensor and insert it into, I would say, just the far right-hand cable gland. It's a little easier to tighten these things if you're using the one on the far end versus the one on in the middle. And in my case, I'm using a cable gland that had been tightened way too tight earlier, and the rubber jacket on the sensor cable is a tiny bit too big to fit in here without a little bit of force. So just kind of wiggle it around sometimes, but once you get it going, you've now got your CTD cable, and the headphone jack is way up inside there, so that only the red part of the sensor cable is in the cable gland. It gets nice and loose at that point. And then you can reach in and use your headphone jack socket to plug into the end of the sensor cable. And remember, this is the part you've got to snap it in so that there's no silver part of the headphone jack visible anymore. And this is another one of those things where if you don't tighten this cable gland, water and ants and bugs will crawl up in here, or somebody could potentially yank on this cable and pull it out and disconnect it. So like if I just pull a little bit, you see I've now disconnected this. So even though it looks like it's still all together, it's not. So you want to, once you get this thing in and you've got the headphone jack connected, then you want to tighten down on this cable gland. Don't use a wrench on these, just use your bare hands to make it to where it's snug, that when you pull on the cable, it's not moving. right? And then now your cable is secured and water is not going to get up inside there.
And Shannon, they want to make sure to not over tighten that, right?
That's what I just said. Don't use a wrench, just use your hand. And unless you're super, super strong, there's no chance that you're going to over tighten this with your hand. The last thing you want to do is go grab a wrench like this and tighten up a cable gland on the cable end of it, because you will, it'll do a great job of making it super watertight, but you'll damage the cable, and you'll probably make it so that you can't undo this without damaging the cable gland, and then it'll leak and it'll cause all sorts of problems. So just make it hand tight and snug enough that the cable is not moving around. And then I'm looking around. This is the one part I do not have because I gave my last one to the extra station that we shipped out. But we're going to want to plug up the extra turbidity sensor cable gland hole with, I'm going to use a Sharpie, but you guys all got a short green chunk of wire about 4 inches long in your box of parts. And that is just a cut up piece of an extension cord. And it's the exact same diameter as the turbidity cable. So if you plug that cable in there and then tighten it down, now you're going to keep water from getting in this hole. And then at a later date, if you buy a turbidity sensor, you can unscrew that, remove the cable, and then feed the new turbidity sensor cable in there. If you didn't do that, like sometimes we'll put these stations out with only the one big cable gland, and then when someone wants to upgrade, I have to go out to the field with this gigantic drill bit to drill a new hole in the box. And then you have to use a special tap to put threads in the box. And then you have to take all the wrenches and put it on. It's just a lot of trouble. So since all of you requested a turbidity sensor in the future, we made these boxes. These cable glands only cost like $3 to $4, so it's not too bad. So we've given you those. So just put your green cable in there. Just put it about halfway, so like there's like an inch or two sticking out, and then tighten it up, and that'll keep water out. And I almost pinched my finger in the back, so I know. Has anybody pinched their finger yet? All right, good. I'm glad. It really hurts, so I'm really glad you didn't see anybody screaming in pain. So I'm going to disconnect my CTD just to make this a little bit easier to handle. So I'm starting to run out of time, but we've gotten to just about the end of all of the high points that we wanted to talk about. But there's probably a few questions. People are like, why did you give me a screwdriver with my box of parts? Well, it's a really handy I think they call it a 6-in-1 tool or something. We get these from Lowe's when we get the scrub brushes, but it's a handy tool because you'll need that Phillips head screwdriver for maybe installing a new, the screws on the back that hold the cable glands, or excuse me, the mounting bracket. But if you remove the screwdriver bit that's on the end of it, you're left with a little hex driver, which fits the cable, these hose clamps that we gave you. You have 2 small hose clamps and 1 large hose clamp. The large hose clamp is for attaching the sensors to the pipe that goes in the water. The small hose clamp is what goes on the back of your data logger box that then goes to the fence post. So you'll use the nut driver to unscrew your hose clamp. And then you can just feed it through like that on the back of your mounting bracket. And then you can put this then around, in our case, we like to use a 3/4 inch galvanized pipe because they've got couplers and adapters and things that we can use. If for some reason you need to put this on a really large fence post or a tree or whatever it is, you can use a larger clamp. They come in all different sizes. We like this size because it works nicely with the pipes that we normally install our stations on. And then the last bit of what you have to do to put on the pole is the solar panel. We get these solar panels from a special company in New York that these are nice waterproof, durable panels. They come in different sizes. This is a small one. We usually don't use a small one. We use these larger ones because they work great with the cell phone modules that we use. And there's these small little plastic kind of rivet looking things on the back. So you can sometimes use a flathead screwdriver or just grab a pair of pliers and you unscrew those tiny little rivets and they fit nicely on. There's a slot on one side and then usually like a little, just a hole on this side. So you would put the little threaded stud through here and then use the plastic nut to kind of tighten that up. So it's a little bit on the fragile side just because you're using a small piece of plastic on a small little threaded piece there. So we haven't had any problem with these being damaged from like breaking off there. I'm not going to put the other one on, but essentially you've got your panel on the bracket like this. We have had some times where something falls on the panel and then kind of bends this bracket so it's no longer pointed in the right direction. But essentially these things are really, really durable. And then it's got this waterproof connector that's on the end that plugs in nicely to the barrel jack. It makes a nice waterproof connection so that there's no leaks, no water or corrosion or anything. So it does a really good job for being outdoors. And then you've got a U-bolt that comes in your box of parts, and you can put that on the bracket like this and put this on your the pipe. If for some reason you decide you're putting this on a larger diameter pipe, then you can just go to the store and buy a larger U-bolt. But this is the proper U-bolt for going around the 3/4 inch galvanized pipe that we normally do. So you would just put that on like that. And it allows you can also flip it over backwards so that you could have your panel, you could end up doing it this way and put the panel on the front so that you could have it upwards facing. So you can put these in different orientations. Sometimes we'll even put this below the station if there's more sunshine down below. So you can just kind of get creative in how you install the solar panel there. All of this stuff in terms of the installation of what you need to put the station, this last part, putting it together and putting it on the pole and then putting the sensors in the water. All of this is documented in our the sensor manual that we've written with photos and descriptions. And there's actually a great video that Rachel did a year or two ago of how to install this in the stream, where we show you a lot of our tips about how to put it in, which is stuff that we would normally go through in one of our workshops. But if you're curious, then this is how we do it with turbidity sensor. Is we use that larger hose clamp and a piece of PVC pipe. I think we were talking about this with Bob the other day. We use this PVC conduit, the 3/4 inch gray conduit, which is not the same as white PVC pipe that you would use for water lines. It's gray conduit you buy in the electrical section. And then you drill a hole in the top, either 1.5 inches or 3 inches down from the top. Usually we do 3 inches down. And then you use that large safety pin looking thing that we included in your kit. After you've secured your sensors, either one or both of your sensors to the pipe at the right depth, we recommend this rebar that you can get at the hardware store that has pre-drilled holes in it every 3 inches on one side, and then they rotate it, there's another one on the other. So the first hole is 3 inches down from the top, but it allows you to put this special like safety retainer pin in the top of the rebar. And if you've got a hole drilled in the right spot on your pipe, then you know that every time you remove the sensors for maintenance and you put them back in and you line up the pinholes, then you'll always put your sensor at the exact same place. So it makes it really great for repeating your measurements. So you would hammer the rebar in the ground and then insert the pin in the top to get it to anchor itself. It's very hard to do one-handed and on a camera. It is a two-handed kind of a thing, but we make this stuff rugged enough because it's going to be subjected to floods and debris and all sorts of stuff. So we've got to kind of go overkill and make it really robust so that it doesn't get damaged.